And good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the public, planning board members, members of town staff, our legal counsel, and applicants that are attending this meeting. This is Amy Glassmeyer. I'm the chair of the planning board. It is 6:30 p.m. and I'm calling the meeting to order. I will be calling the names in reverse order this evening. Clark Brewer, Paul Caleri, Tom Callahan,
Tony.
I'm here.
Paul Grady,
Present.
Eric Potter, Amy Glassmeyer here. So we have a number of individual.
Clark Brewer here.
Thank you. Miss Lauren Lynn, the planning director, will be in attendance for the start of the meeting. Then she will pass the baton to Miss Jennifer Oram, who's the assistant director of planning, permits, and inspections, and will return later in the meeting. And Miss Oram, are you going to be explaining to the public how they can participate in the meeting?
I certainly can if you like.
Well, it's really, so Lauren, why don't you do it? And then,
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. So for members of the public wishing to be heard, there will be, for the public hearings that we have two on our agenda that are the two second and third items on the agenda. And there will be an appropriate time designated for public comment. We'll ask that you insert your name and address into the chat. You can leave written comments, or you can just note that you'd like to address the board, and we'll promote you to use your camera and microphone as you wish. We do ask that you try not to repeat any items that have already been said, and you keep your comments 2 or 3 minutes maximum. Also, I will just note that there's already one comment in the chat. If you could just let us know which public hearing you're here to speak to, that would be helpful. That way we can promote you at the appropriate time. And I'll just note that the first item on our agenda is an informal discussion. There is no designated public comment period on that. It's just informal. It's not a public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I will also indicate that we'll be having 2 site plan reviews this evening. One is a seasonal food purveyance operation proposed for a space adjacent to the town parking area. The second is a site plan review due to major modifications of a multifunction project on Chief Justice Highway. At the end of the meeting, we will handle the planning board's business, and Ms. Lynn will update us on items that were not foreseen 48 hours ago. So with no further ado, I would like to ask Ms. Malatesta if she would like to begin her informal discussion with the planning board.
Chair, I'm sorry, I can't get my video to work. That's okay. I think Ted's gonna run point with the majority of the meeting. Just on my husband's laptop tonight. So.
Do you have something that you could give to Ms. Oram or Ms. Lynn that they could show images if necessary?
So Ted will be sharing the presentation. I was just going to provide a update. So Lauren or Jen, if you don't mind providing Ted. Oh, looks like Ted has access now.
We can see Ted's screen.
Oh, great. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Just wanted to touch base with you guys. Last time we spoke was back in September. So I know it's been a couple months. We thought we would just provide a brief update to you guys in advance of submitting our site plan and special permit application. So before Ted gets kind of in the weeds and details on all the fun stuff that we just give you guys a quick update. And thank you so much for everyone's feedback and guidance last time. It was really helpful on just next steps and the direction that we're headed is very helpful. So last time, since last time we spoke, we have commissioned a draft impact traffic analysis, which we will be submitting with our special permit application. So that is underway. We've also conducted initial geotech efforts to understand the site's subsurfaces, including bedrock and soil types that Ted and Greg can provide a further update on. We've also studied the culvert specifications and impacts to our site. We used the water fields engineering plans that Jason Federico provided. So those were extremely helpful. So thank you and shout out to Jason. And then just what we want to focus on today is just the initial studies of massings and elevation concepts starting from the ground up, which will be the focus of today. And so that's the direction that we're headed, and that's what we've done so far. And so with that, this is the project team, just to give you guys a quick reminder. So I am with DW Sawyer, one of the development partners on the project team. And then with me tonight is my development partners, Admiral Leora, including Jan and Paul. They're here tonight if you have any questions for them. Ted Talukian and his team is the architect. Greg Morris is our engineer. Howard Stein Hudson conducted the traffic impact analysis, and John Dennehy is our attorney. Ted, I think if there with that, I think if there's anything else that I can help answer, otherwise feel free to take it from here. Ted, I don't think we can hear you.
Ted, you are muted. Ted, you're still muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. All right, so let me just a little bit of a
Ted, I'm sorry, you appear to have muted yourself again.
all right, here we go.
There we are.
There's a little reverberation happening on the screen, but I'll get through this. All right, can you see the screen? Okay, it
Yes.
has the team members.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So thank you for being back tonight. We're excited to show you the development of the project. And with that, recap is going to be an existing conditions, review. I think everyone knows the site pretty well. We're going to walk through some of the site plan zoning options that we have in front of us, as well as walk you through the proposed conceptual design, and then certainly seek questions and guidance at the end of the presentation. Because we have a limited amount of time, I won't give you the same presentation on the existing conditions and just focus on everyone I think knows the site, 55 South Main Street. It's a former gas station. I think it's a great opportunity to make significant civic improvements to the downtown Village District area. And with that, I'll just do a quick virtual walk around the site, starting with South Main, looking up this beautiful pedestrian path that makes a connection to Main Street and the public parking, which we think is a great opportunity for the project, as well as a view down James Lane, where we also think we can make some significant improvements to sidewalks and universal access around the perimeter of the site. And then I'll end with a photograph showing South Main Street, where there's some actually large curb cuts where we will make also some improvements to provide better pedestrian circulation and more visitor parking and street parking. I think a couple things that we have looked at is certainly the site is very unique. There's a couple different easements. We know there's the James Brook drainage easement. There's a sewage easement, a roadway easement that we've looked at. And as I point out, some larger curb cuts. We've worked with the town to identify in some initial discussions where the zoning front yard setback, side yard, and rear yard would be identified. And we look forward to having further conversations to confirm that. In general, the existing lot is about 20,000 square feet. We're looking to provide 20 residential units, which is a mix of studios, 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms, 1 to 3 commercial units on the ground floor. I want to point out that the residential units will include a mix of affordable and market rate units. By creating a streetscape that includes street trees and pedestrian access along the perimeter of the site, not just on South Main, but also James Lane, we're able to provide 3 additional parking spots on South Main Street. Also, I think one of the really nice elements is how we're including a small public pocket park adjacent to the Red Lion Inn, which will be open to the public. Garage parking to an underground parking area through an automated lift system. And then looking to work through the town way as an opportunity for residential duplexes that can really help activate that pedestrian access that leads up to public parking. There'll be a mix of green space, street trees, some pervious pavers, and maintaining 10 feet side yard setback. And one of the unique things that we looked at on the site was how to create, I think, strong urban connections between 45, 47 South Main Street and also the Red Lion Inn. And so we'll show you three-dimensionally and how this is working out, but really creating some adjacencies that make alignments to the buildings in different ways to help stitch together, I think, the diverse scale and character that exists along Main Street. With that in mind, I'm just going to kind of walk you through some initial very massing. This isn't the project that shows our development of the thinking and some of the conversations that we had with the staff. This is an aerial view just showing block massing where we started that showed some of the incongruencies between the Red Lion Inn and 45, 47 South Main. By setting it back on the corner of James Lane, it allowed us an opportunity to make a great connection, I think, between the Red Lion Inn and also an opportunity to make some outdoor space in a public plaza while still maintaining connections up on South Main Street. And you're seeing that from two different directions. From the streetscape, just to kind of walk you some of the thinking, again, looking at some of the block massing, going into a sort of a mansard roof with the setbacks, and then working more towards the design itself that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about. So this is a very initial design study, and really what we're seeing here is how we're beginning to try to make outdoor space, not just with the street trees and the connectivity with brick pavers, but also by setting back the building, creating great, I think, public plaza space where the ground floor activation of the commercial space will really flow out to it, some outdoor seating, planters, and it's really going to get a lot of natural light through the southern exposure, providing a lot of transparency and glazing on all sides that really get great visibility through the building to the retail level. And then using a mix of, I think, siding materials and larger windows that are reinforce the different street patterns that exist. And I think because the building, I should say, the site is fairly long, one of the opportunities by breaking the facade allowed us to break it down into smaller elements to evoke some of the rhythms along the street. And I think the sides, by wrapping the windows, we're able to activate the storefronts and provide visibility, as I mentioned, through the ground floor. And the differences I think we tried to create between the ground floor and the signage panels, as well as canopies that they can express, is really felt it was very important to be a part of the ground floor pedestrian experience. And at the top floor, a strong roof line that is a mansard that really helps contribute to the variety of roof lines in the district. Simple in geometry, but setback that supports, I think, the rhythms and the variations that we're all seeking to find. And in terms of materials, we'd like to look at ways that we could provide traditional materials and combine them in sort of new contemporary ways by being respectful to the past, but looking towards the future. The siding itself, a cedar siding with a light semi-transparent stain in a whitish tone that can help provide some auburn colors, which I think could be really nice with the different types of light that come across the facade. The roof shingles, looking at a stained white cedar shingle that will provide, again, that texture and scale, but also allowing for that contemporary connection to the historic past. And then trying to pull out some of the stronger contrasting colors of the windows in a gunmetal gray or a darker color, as well as a precast or granite base that could be durable during all seasons. And you begin to see some of those materials together. And again, just to walk you down the street, and I think it really creates a good opportunity by recessing that back and providing the dormers. I think the scale of the building at 3 levels provides, really opportunity to create connections back to the scale of the street shape. And I do want to point out as well, because of the James Brook easement, we've looked to create an uninterrupted ground plane while allowing it to be another outdoor plaza that can reciprocate on both ends of the site, create great connections between the different potential users that exist, and then certainly outdoor spaces that can look up Main Street in different directions. I think a part of that, and Cassie touched on it, was the James Brook easement itself. And so we did a little research, looked at some of the drawings and studies that were done by Waterfield Design, and began to see about where that box culvert was located far enough away from the building. And this section is a diagram that just begins to everyone to understand, the box culvert location from the documents that we've received relative to the foundations. And what you're seeing is how we're really set back away from that, creating load paths that won't interrupt the box culvert itself, and as well as providing a minimum of 12-foot clearance above the drainage easement in case there had to be any maintenance to the area itself. And of course, we just want to round out the discussion with our analysis of the open space and the coverage and how we exceed the minimum requirements between pervious and green space areas. And that's through some initial discussions that we had with the town staff. So overall and in general, I just want to say that we really think this is a terrific project, a terrific opportunity to create a mix of vibrant mixed uses. Providing an active public pocket park off of James Lane. A very important piece of this is providing continuous accessible access on Main Street and James Lane or Parking Way all around the site, which I believe is a really significant improvement. And reinforcing the patterns, not only with the widened and continuous sidewalk, but with the street trees and the transparency on all levels, and providing additional off-street parking and drainage mitigation will really help round out the project. Throughout this process, we also looked, I think it was a terrific guideline that you put together with the Village Business District. And we really focused on trying to capture many of the elements that you pointed out, which is certainly to preserve and enhance the historical and cultural heritage of the village, with not only new development that incorporates elements inspired by the Village's Business District guidelines, strengthening the district with a mix of uses that includes, we think, vibrant commercial ground floor with a diverse set of residential unit types, with a diverse, I should say, housing alternatives between affordable and market rate. And then also allowing for creativity and variety in the architecture, which brings contemporary architecture inspired by traditional elements. And a big part of our practice has always been centered around sustainability and resiliency, and focusing on not only energy efficiency, but low carbon footprint for the project. So overall, not only would we have an opportunity here to improve the infrastructure and enhance open space and strive to make sensitive connections to adjacent contexts, but mostly promote civic connections throughout the area. So with that, I'll try to leave enough time, I hope, for you to provide any questions and certainly your guidance on our next steps, as this is a preliminary introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Malatesta, would you like to make any further comments?
I don't really have any further comments. Thanks, Ted. I think that was great and really summarized our efforts to date on the massing and elevation studies. So I think just the purpose of today was just to hear some feedback and some guidance before next steps on our application and formal submission.
All right, thank you very much. I will call first Eric Potter and ask if he has any comments.
I don't have any comments at this time. I think it's a continued effort on the applicant's part to do the best project that's available to both the town and the city and the developer. So right now, I think everything looks great, and I'm impressed with the presentation again. I think it's good to keep us updated like this. That'll help when we actually get to the application itself.
All right, thank you. Mr. Grady?
No, so far I'm on board with the presentations. They've done a very nice job. So I'm looking forward to seeing it progress.
All right, thank you. Mr. Callahan?
I apologize, I stepped away for a minute. If you already said this, but in the affordable units, are you doing 10% or 25%?
The initial underwriting, I believe, is 10%, Tom.
Which would be 2?
That is correct.
All right. And I would strongly urge you to make them something other than the studios. The studios should be, reasonable priced as they are, but I think the real meaningful affordable unit would come from something larger than that.
No, thank you for your feedback. And we did, I can't recall if it was before September's informal meeting or after, but we did have our first meeting with the Affordable Steering Committee, just to give a high level presentation to them as well. But thank you for your feedback, and we'll definitely consider it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Callahan. Mr. Colery?
I have nothing really further to add. I think the presentation was great, and I can tell you the Affordable Housing Steering Committee is excited to potentially get 2 more units on the books. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Brewer, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Yeah, I want to thank the team for their presentation. The main thing that jumps out at me is it looks like you're complying, but not completely with the front and side setbacks, particularly with the cantilever over the alley and easement. The planning board can provide relief, and I'm assuming you're asking for front and side setback relief, but it's not a given. And so I guess I would think about that a little bit and maybe test the waters again with another informal.
Is that all your comments?
I'm sorry?
I said, is that all of your comments?
Well, that's a big one. So I mean, I think everything else is, any other comment would be relatively minor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Malatesta, I would like to ask you about the underground parking. This issue came up when we were working on the harbor project. And have you had an opportunity to do any type of analysis of potential floods if sea level rises?
So Ted has done a great job of starting the initial concepts with not only the parking operators, but also the structural engineers. And after a thorough conversation with with our geotech engineer yesterday, after initial findings, we are definitely taking that into strong, we need to think about that because it's extremely important. But Ted, I mean, to my knowledge, as far as the flood zone, I think we've looked at very closely, but in kind of initial conversations with geotech and structural, where's your head on that? Is there any kind of initial concepts you want to present to the chair and the rest of the board?
Yeah, I do want to point out, that's an excellent question. Our openings will be within the guidelines of the FEMA floodplain. We will be dry flood proofing the basement garage entirely. And we will be, basically making the provisions against any potential flooding hazard. The garage actually entry is to the far, I should say, western part of the site. And because of that, it's at the highest elevation grade, which is approximately elevation 12 or 13. And it's above the, I believe it's above the FEMA flood height.
All right, just for your information, this might be helpful. Cohasset and Situate both were together in a study that was done to analyze the consequences of different levels of surge and sea level rise. And it was done by an organization and in Provincetown. And Ms. Laura Lind supervised our end of things. And it might be helpful to you to actually look at some of the analysis that they have and the speculations that they present as to what will happen in town, both our town and in Situate. I think it might help inform what you're thinking about.
That's That's a great recommendation. We've actually reviewed many of these studies from different organizations. I think they're extremely important and have great information. So we will look to that, and maybe that could the planning director could have someone forward that to us.
Yeah,
just to make
I'll
sure
remind her if she's left here. I'll remind her if she's left the meeting for right now to make sure you get a copy.
Hi all, I'm still here. I can certainly send you that information, but on that note, I have to depart for advisory for a bit, so I'll be back later. Thank you, Cassie, Ted, and team for a wonderful presentation again, and we'll look forward to receiving a formal application.
Thank you.
Right, well, with no further comments, Jen, are we operating on the time system basis that we can begin the next hearing? That we're just essentially going sequentially, because we have about 5 minutes or 4 minutes before we hit the 7 o'clock hour for the first site plan review.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've actually, we advertised both of these hearings at 6:30. So we can actually start. I'm just gonna pull up, if you just give me a second, I'm just gonna, if I could just ask them to stop sharing the screen. So that I
Yes.
could, thank you. And
There
then
you go.
if the board is ready to continue with the next public hearing, I'm happy to then go in and share the public hearing notice for Paul to read.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. So Mr. Grady, would you please read the hearing notice?
I have to
Nothing
find it.
we have here.
All right, let's see if this is,
Thank you.
thank you. There, can you see that okay, Paul?
I can. Notice of public hearing, Cohasset Planning Board pursuant to MGL Mass General Law, Chapter 40-A and 300-5.12 of the Cohasset zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a virtual public hearing on the Zoom platform, webinar ID 833-9052-9386, password 903635 on Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. for a site plan review for property being shown on Cohasset Assessor's Map ES-18-008A, 12 Parking Way, Cohasset, Mass. 02025. The application is for a site plan review for a seasonal beer garden and raw bar in the rear parking lot of 12 Parking Way, including a 40-foot container bar and restroom facilities. The application is submitted by Split Rock Social Incorporated. Copy of the application, plans, and accompanying documents are on file in the town clerk's office at Cohasset Town Hall, 41 Highland Avenue, with office hours of Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Electronic copies of said application can be obtained by contacting Planning Director Lauren Lind via email at lind@cohassetmass.org. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the application should access the virtual meeting at the time designated. Signed, Amy Glassmeyer, Chair, Planning Board.
Okay.
Before we begin this hearing, I would like to ask the applicant to please identify who will be speaking.
Sure. Hi, my name's Erin Herman, and I'm going to lead off things tonight.
All right, and will there be another person speaking as well? Or will you be speaking alone?
No, so my partner Ryan Hilton is here, and then we also have a representative from the engineering firm who is here as well.
And may I have the name of the person from the, oh, Mr. Grady, thank you.
Yes, Rick Grady, Grady Consulting.
All right. Thank you. Can I get a motion to open the hearing?
Let's open it.
You don't need one.
Thank you. So Ms. Herman, would you please begin?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for your time. Seems like you have the Zoom meeting down pretty well here. I just kind of want to open things up and lay out exactly kind of our vision for this project. We've been working and in communication with Town Hall since I believe June. Everyone's been super helpful along the process. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. just to give you guys some visuals on the concept. So I'm not sure if anyone has seen this website, but we created this website to essentially give the public kind of a little feel for what we're envisioning for this space. It's located over at 12 Parking Way in the lot behind the building. And you can kind of see, sorry, it's a little fuzzy, but you can kind of see the outline here of the lot. This is the current 12 Parking Way building, and along here, this is where the property would start, and it would include some tables here along the side, which could be moved out of the way for access to the dumpster. And over here, we will have some fire pits and more seating, some more seating along here. And the focal point of the entire project is a converted container bar, which is being manufactured and soup to nuts, essentially fully converted running bar. On one side, it will have a 5-valve draft line, and on the other side, it will have a raw bar, a fully functioning raw bar. And enclosed in the container itself are actually 3 bathrooms. This one kind of shows 2, but after talking with the town, we knew that there was a need for 3 bathrooms. So this screen here shows more up-to-date render. Don't pay attention to all the red things, it's a little disjointed, but the main thing here are the bathrooms. This is how the bathrooms are going to be laid out. 2 regular stalls, and then 1 ADA compliant restroom with a sink, and then 3 sinks on the outside there for access for the other 2 stalls. So a few other pictures, just some renderings that we had done up of what our vision is, and it won't be exactly like this, but this hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea. Some, tables, the container there, just kind of an inviting atmosphere. And the whole point of this venture is to have a space where people can come together and kind of celebrate the community. So we are really looking forward to speaking with you guys, and hopefully this is the first step in the process of getting this launched and running up in spring. So really appreciate your time. And I guess with that, we could kind of dive into some of the more technical aspects of the project. Unless Ryan, did you want to add anything? Ryan, I'm not sure. I guess we could just go ahead.
Sorry,
and
feeling
oh,
challenge
there he is.
still lingering from storm, but no, that was good. Thank you, Aaron.
Okay, it's all yours, Rick.
Okay, thank you, Rick Grady from Grady Consulting. I'm actually logged in here twice, and I was hoping to share the screen from my PC. I think I was currently invited as a participant on my iPad here, so I'm probably there one more time.
I will promote you. One moment.
Thank you.
You should be all set now.
All right. Here we go. Share screen. Thank you. All right. As Erin had mentioned, once she got talking to the building department, they sent her off to get existing conditions and plot plan. So our surveyors did an existing conditions plan of the existing building, as well as the parking area to the rear of the building. From a site perspective, this is really pretty straightforward. It's an existing paved parking lot to the rear of the building. They're actually going to be doing quite a bit of crushed stone and other impervious coverage. So we have the unusual circumstance on this particular project of reducing any stormwater runoff from the site by reducing the amount of pavement that currently exists. It's a relatively flat area. It slopes approximately 1 to 2 feet. All the drainage is currently directed towards a catch basin in this area here, towards the rear parking lot. The grades will stay very similar to what they are today. Everything will continue to slope away from the street, away from the neighboring properties, and towards the existing catch basin at the center of the site. As far as utility connections, there's actually a couple of sewer services or sewer lines already located within this back parking lot. So they're actually able to connect the plumbing from the proposed trailer configuration here, or raw bar and bathrooms, into these existing sewer lines that are depicted in these light S-dashed lines in this area here. We've had discussions with the water department, and they've asked that we actually connect the water service through the existing building rather than doing a completely new service, so we don't disrupt any paving that was done in the not too distant past here. So they'll want us to just connect into the existing service for the existing building. They do want to relocate and screen the dumpsters to the rear left corner on this area here. Right now, the dumpsters in front of it here, they will be screening that in this area here. They have proposed, I'll zoom in a little bit here because it's getting a little hard to read. They are proposing trellis barriers around the patio seating areas and around the oyster and raw bar area. And that's really pretty much it. Yeah, so no stormwater impacts, existing utilities to connect into, and would be glad to answer any questions you may have. Oh, did I lose audio here?
Sorry, I apologize. I was asking if Ms. Herman wanted to say anything further, and if not, then if you are interested in speaking again, just let me know.
Okay.
So let's begin with Eric Potter.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm just a little, I think might we going out of order a little bit tonight?
No, I decided to change things up and start at the end and end at the beginning.
I'm a little bit, it's taking me off a little off guard as I'm used to the process of things, but change is never a bad thing, I guess.
You have to lead us off, Eric.
Jeez, holy cow. So yeah, I actually think something like this would be good for the vibrancy of the village. The renderings, you know, I think it's it's nice just to see a concept of what's going on down there. And it looks like you guys are trying to take care of all the concerns you'd have with the bathroom being ADA compliant and having those spaces. I think is gonna bring a little bit more of a community environment down there. So, you know, it looks good to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I have some slight, you know, obviously the biggest concerns in that area are really with regards to parking and in capacity to handle the traffic. I think are being down in the village. Those are my two biggest concerns. But in the same hand, you know, I believe that something like this is get people outside a little bit more. It definitely will be another place for people to congregate in town. So if the parking and traffic is taken care of and doesn't seem to be overloaded in that particular area, then I'm on board with something like this.
Mr. Potter, would you like to ask how the parking is going to be addressed?
How is the parking going to be addressed? Because, you know, and maybe I missed it. I don't know what the hours of operation are going to be. If it's going to be open all day during the seasons where you can get at people out there, or is it gonna, just be an evening, 4 o'clock and past that? I think that would probably make a big difference, right?
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question. That's something that we actually talked about too. And one of the biggest concerns that kind of drove capacity, which is set at 100 people. We'd push for more, but we understand the traffic concerns and the parking. So with the lot being there, the idea is that is a space where people can go. The other point is that it's walkable since it is in town. A lot of our residents, our demographics are people in town. And it is a seasonal business, like you mentioned. Our hours are going to be kind of truncated around from 12 to 9, Wednesday through Saturday, and then Sunday 12 to 5. So really trying to be respectful, you know, of noise and traffic and everything like that. So
Yeah.
hopefully that answers that.
It does answer it. And to be quite, just as maybe not even totally, you know, it's just a general comment. I think I think where the town has to, you know, this is again, not necessarily in response to your particular project, but we're always asking, you know, developers and applicants about parking and traffic. And I think that, you know, the town should maybe give it some thought as well, because we want to promote new businesses coming into town. We want to promote, you know, a vibrant village. And sometimes, you know, just in going from developer to developer, you know, with regards to parking and traffic is not the only party that really has a responsibility here. That's just a general thought on that, because it's coming up a lot as the village looks to be turning over more and there's more development and more new buildings going into place. You know, it seems like people that, you know, in power in town should also try to be thinking of a solution to this to help people like you come in and start businesses that are going to bring people into the community and get people together.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Are you finished, Mr. Potter?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Grady.
So far, I like it very much. I mean, a coastal town, a place to sit down, have a dozen oysters and a cold beer, not a bad go. And as to the parking, I share Eric's concerns, but we're also looking into putting more housing into the village, which is going to take up parking on a more permanent basis, as far as I'm concerned. So a place like this that revitalizes, people can walk to. Right now, so far, so good.
All right, thank you, Mr. Callahan.
Well, I'm glad to see this project coming back. I mean, not coming back, that you weren't, I don't think you were the previous applicant for something like this. It's sad that the earlier proposal got killed, but I do think parking is going to become a concern as much as we want to encourage more outdoor spaces and uses in the village. I'd like to know, you know, what's the capacity of our parking lot and what's the demands on that capacity at the times you intend to operate. You know, the project we just heard about earlier tonight is going to have its own parking. So, but there may be other projects coming along that won't. And I'm concerned, Eric's point is well taken that maybe the town needs to come up with a solution, but I would like to see this applicant give us some analysis of how many spaces are in our lot and what the demands on that are at right now in the season that they want to operate with the other restaurants we have. And you know, a capacity of 100 is more than I anticipated to hear for this, and that's a lot of people, and could be a lot of parking issues that we will have. My other comment was about the application itself. The one we have on our website is blank. And so who is the owner of this property, and if they signed off on this? Does anybody, Lauren isn't here, but
Yeah, so we are renting the space from Mike Akasar, is our landlord, who owns 12 Parking Way. And we've been working in tandem with him from the beginning. And yes, he is fully on board. He's kind of more of a partner in a way than a landlord, because he's been so helpful. So yeah, he is fully aware and on board with what is going on.
well, did he sign the application?
Our application for the site plan,
Yeah.
I believe so.
Well, you know, at some point we need to have the actual application up on our website and make sure that the owner is fully on board with this. He should be signing it.
Ms. Orm, would you like to comment? Just a minute, please. Ms. Orm, would you like to comment?
I'll follow up. I did put that up on the website and I could see it. So it could be something with Adobe. So I'll work with Aaron to get that straightened out, because I did put it up there. So we'll work on that, those comments.
Adobe is always at fault.
I was like, I know we did that.
Yeah, it's a weird little thing. So
Okay.
And my other concern beyond the parking is the sewage disposal. What are you going to do for that? Are these going to be porta potties?
Oh, no. So actually, the bathrooms are going to be built into the container and it's going to be directly tied into the existing sewer line. So that was something that the engineering team looked at as well. I don't know, Rick, if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Is that going to need approval of the sewer commission?
Yes, any connection to the sewer line there will need approval of the sewer commission.
Okay.
So, and it is directly there. It's really a short pipe connection to connect the trailer into the existing sewer line.
And the advice that I received from town hall was to go through the site plan committee first and then kind of knock out like the sewer approval and then the water approval, et cetera.
Well, all right, so I got, you know, again, my main issue right now is the demand on the parking that this will create.
All right, Mr. Callahan, would you like to make a recommendation regarding the issue of parking?
Well, I don't know, I'm not an expert in this and how this gets studied. Traffic engineers study traffic. I imagine they can study parking capacity. So, you know, if that requires the town to retain somebody for this, or the applicant, but, you know, there should be.
But
some
are you recommending
idea
that?
on a summer, you know, I'm concerned, you know, if you have daytime operation during the week, are we interfering with other retail businesses? But the biggest demand is going to be on weekends and weekend nights with all the other restaurants in operation. And I just want, you know, the parking lot isn't that big. I just want to make sure we have the capacity to handle everything and not create other problems in the village.
Thank you. Are you making a recommendation to ask the applicant to undertake a planning study to determine how the night usage of the site it currently is?
Yeah.
Just Mr. Brewer,
If that can be done, yes.
yeah, okay, thank you. So I'm still continuing down the list of planning board members. Mr. Colery?
My comment had to do with the parking.
All right, well, just a minute. I'd like to get through the list first and then you can address it during your time. Mr. Colery?
Sure. Good evening, and thank you for your presentation. Sorry, I'll try to activate my camera while I drive here. I just want to make sure that is the applicant aware that I believe somebody about a year ago, right, came before us and did what I think most of us thought was a great presentation. Seemed like got some support from the board, and then I think there was a problem with one of the tenants in the building. Is the applicant aware of that? I guess I'd like to ask that. Is this the same location? We're talking about the same location, correct?
Yeah, yes, you're not having deja vu. This is the same location. So that was actually our first call when we wanted to do this project, was to Brian from Seabird to see if he was still going to be doing a beer garden or interested in doing a beer garden. We got the whole rundown from him of what happened last time. And yes, to your point, everything had been approved by the town. The liquor license was granted. The issue really came when a tenant of an abutter in the building of 12 Parking Way, it was a dentist, took issue with the business concept essentially. And that kind of derailed the project. And Brian relinquished his application at that point. So yeah, fully aware. The tenant that was posting the objections is no longer there. And so that's where Brian and I found that there is an opportunity to utilize this space again. So that's why we are here again with the same space and hopefully a different outcome.
Wonderful. Thank you. I loved it then and I love it more now. So best of luck. I think it was a great presentation.
Thanks, Paul.
Right, thank you. Mr. Brewer.
Yeah, my follow-up comment on the parking is that the MAPC, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, did a parking study for the village several years ago. So I would grab that first, but the reality is that our zoning allows the use of the municipal lot for any businesses that are within a certain distance of that lot, which this certainly would comply with. I mean, looking at the aerial photography, there's like 6 or 7 cars back there in the in the Google Earth. So obviously those would be displaced. But I think it makes sense to get that parking study since that work has already been done. That may give a head start to some understanding of what's already been figured out for the village parking lot. But I've got a couple of basic questions. One is that this is site plan review, but it's a project that's in the village. So are we looking at this under Article 18 of the zoning bylaw, the village business district work? Wouldn't it be a combined permit application?
It's an allowed
Ms.
use.
Oram?
Restaurants allowed use. We didn't require that for the last application.
I thought that there was an issue for the last application because they didn't have a building, that it was basically just gear, you know what I mean?
So we had them in this case, because it's over 200 square feet, it triggered site plan review.
Yeah, but we have a village bylaw, and this is a project in the village. Wouldn't we combine the two as a part of this review of the, I mean, planning board has jurisdiction over special permits for projects in the village.
Correct,
As
but
well as site plan review for projects over 200 square feet
but
throughout.
this would be an issuance of a building permit, not a special permit. We've already been meeting with them, and John didn't feel, I don't believe, I'm not going to speak for him because he's not here, but special, I don't see how it falls under special permit because it's an allowed use. Unless I'm wrong, and I can I can talk to John about it tomorrow. We're going to have to continue this anyway.
Every use in the village is a special permit use by Article 18.
Right, so yeah, if you could look into that.
No, I'll look at the table
yeah.
of area regs.
That would be important to cover both at the same time. And Mr. Grady, the engineer, has done some peer reviews for us in the past. And I'm wondering, did we ask for a peer review of this project of any of our consultants? Is that a no, Amy?
No, we did not ask for a peer review.
Should we?
On what basis would you recommend that we do that? I mean, we're asking essentially for a transportation study to determine the impact with and without the project, and to get it some, I mean, it has to be a dynamic study. That is, it can't be just a shot in time. It actually has to be over time for some period of time so that you can actually see what the flow is. Would you recommend something further?
Well, I don't know. I mean, typically for these the projects that we look at, we do have a peer review dotting the i's and crossing the t's and giving us their perspective on what's being proposed, any issues. So I'll let that rest for now. Perhaps it makes sense to
We can look at that. We will look at that.
with Lauren and the building inspector on that. And this is a pretty, I think it's fun. I think it's a great space. I wonder if there might be some need for deployable shade devices in addition to the umbrellas. And I wonder if moving the trash closer to the parking lot might be advantageous in that the activity area around the container, where you currently have dumpsters. That seems like it's a prime sort of activity area, and the area further to the west towards the parking lot, while not as close to the bar per se, would be less likely to affect the residents in terms of smells.
Mr. Brewer, could you ask to have the map put back up so we can understand what you're actually alluding to? That would be really helpful.
Okay, in the upper
Let me
left
share
corner is
my
where they
screen.
put the dumpsters. I thought everybody noticed that. But I'm suggesting that maybe the dumpsters would be best in towards the parking lot end of the site, instead of having the tables really far away from the bar, have the tables where the dumpster is. And that the dumpster smells wouldn't affect the residents that are above the dumpsters. They wouldn't be looking down on them. Now I know there's some other businesses there, but I think that might be a better move for the site plan. But I will say an excellent use of underutilized space. I like the container part. I think it's fun. I just think that maybe some deployable rain screens, shade screen systems might make sense, like a trellis with some tinted polycarbonate or something like that on it.
Right,
Those
thank
are my
you.
comments for now. Did I use my full 3 minutes?
You certainly did. And that's fine. Let me ask, Ms. Herman, would you like to direct Mr. Grady to actually comment on the idea of moving the dumpsters and whether or not you considered that?
We haven't. We are fully, one of the biggest, concerns that we've had is being good neighbors. And, one of the things that we are very cognizant of is the smell from a raw bar. So we've talked at length about how we are going to kind of contain the smells, and we feel like we can do a good job with that. Our partners that are going to be helping us run the raw bar have been in the seafood business for a very long time, and they have special containers and ways of disposing fish that are more palatable, I guess, than just having it sit out in a dumpster. So our idea is to confine that to the dumpster space currently, just because that is the entrance where you're proposing. I just don't know how feasible it would be having the dumpster right there. That being said, if I hear your concern, and we can certainly look at different options of where the best place is for the dumpster.
I think that's the correct approach. It may not be that it's going to work anywhere else besides where you have it located, but we're just asking as a point of information. And if you would be interested in responding to Mr. Brewer's question, that would be very helpful. Other comments, Mr. Brewer?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Mr. Callahan, may I ask a few questions, or would you like to continue on about the dumpster? You're muted.
It's not about the dumpster. I just have a comment about the permitting that we're doing here.
All right.
Under the table of uses, if the restaurant is going to have any mechanical, taped, or live entertainment, then it needs the special permit under the village bylaw. So the standard for the special permit is not more detrimental to the neighborhood. I would recommend to the applicant, if you have any music in your future by tape or live, which I would imagine you would, want to have a guy with a guitar or a woman, like that, a person with a guitar out there, that you amend your application, also request a special permit under Article 18 of the bylaw. Wouldn't want to have a situation where you don't have the permit for it. Oh, and there's entertainment. Oh, sorry, I got to shut you down on a weekend in the summer. So I'm not thinking that the added special permit of the village is going to be daunting for you with this project, but you might want to consider that and cover all your bases now if you anticipate any music of any type. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. So we'll include that in some of our comments. So I have a few comments that I'd like to ask. They're really just questions about elements of the project. So the first thing is what will happen to the container when the season is over?
Yeah, that's a great question. So these will be fully locked up. They have the ability to be completely shut and locked, and essentially confined for the winter season. The company that we're working with does this professionally with mainly food carts, but they also do containers, and that is kind of their MO as seasonal bars like this. So they have the full capacity to shut down and lock up and be secured off season.
So in that way, then the facility is not going to be removed from the site. It'll be rented for a full 12 months, only it will have occupancy and usage for something less than 12 months.
Yeah.
Okay, so it means that that would not convert into temporary parking.
Right.
Right, okay, that's good to know. The second thing is, could Mr. Grady explain how the connection is going to physically look and feel in association with both the surface, the water service, plus the actual evacuation of the toilet facilities? What is going to be on the ground? And, you know, will it be sticking up? Will it be embedded? And then will the line for the water surface be underground, or is it going to be above ground?
Sure. Both the sewer and the water surface will be completely below ground. You won't see any of that. There'll be a connection below the trailer where the pipe will be approximately 3 to 4 feet below the surface. And that's about the depth of the existing sewer service. The water actually has to go a little bit deeper. You want to get that below the frost. That has to be at least 4 feet below the surface. And will run between the existing building and the container.
All right, so there
nothing
won't be
above ground.
Okay, so there won't be anything somebody could trip on, or anything that would be an unexpected hazard. All right,
Correct.
that's really helpful. And then finally, in preparation for this hearing, I looked all over Boston trying to find a match, your twin. And the reason is because of oysters and the bacteria that is easily grown in oysters. And so I'm sort of curious about what the sanitary procedures are in a situation like this, where it's going to be to open air more so than if you were in a building with 4 sides. And to what extent do you have to have any sort of unusual public health safety related procedures in order to ensure that the food that's provided is sanitary?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the best way to look at this container is almost like a building. It's going to have air conditioning. It's going to have essentially enclosed sides along the raw bar. There will be a window where people can watch a shucker, and a glass display over it. And actually the engineer team that we work with in designing this container, they are up to snuff on a lot of the codes, both health and all the other engineering codes and everything that they have to deal with, and the design of these, because they've done it a million times before. Most recently up in Portland, Oregon, they did a design for this. So all that being said, it's really the preparation and the care that will go into maintaining safety for the oysters is really no different than in a standard restaurant. So that's really it.
Great, because it wasn't clear whether or not it was going to be open or whether it was going to be just like you described it. Would it be possible for us to get an example of the codes that you're describing that the organization has used in similar food-like circumstances? That would, again, educate us for the future and also for the present.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about this. It's kind of a unique situation. Like this container bar converted thing is very unique. So yeah, absolutely. I can email them and get all the codes that they've kind of run into and how they've navigated that for sure.
Great. That would be really helpful for us. Okay, Ms. Orem, you had your hand up.
I think Tom's going to say the same thing, that there's a very similar business down in Duxbury that does the same business. And just by way of background, which I should have started with, is that prior to them coming to you, Erin and Ryan and her team did meet with what we call the permitting group about 2 or 3 times, which included the health director, the planning, the building inspector, and myself, and then I would update Lauren on where we were. So I just wanted you to know that. And then when we go over what our next steps are, I just want to touch on the other points the board had regarding the special permit and also site plan peer review. So when you're ready, I'll.
Right, that would be great, Jen. I think we're there. Unless, let me ask, is anyone?
I don't know what.
Let me just ask, do any of the planning board members wish to ask any further questions? Without that, then, Jen, would you please lead us through the summary?
I didn't see any signage as a part of the project. Is there going to be signage out in the parking lot? And then is there any way to make a connection to that wide pedestrian space that's adjacent, working with whoever owns that? Because that would be a nice way to get to this particular site. In fact, a lot nicer than walking from the parking lot next to the office building. So I don't know if you've explored that, but I think if it's still possible to, I would recommend that.
Are you referring to Stagecoach Way, the little area where there's gravel and a couple picnic tables currently?
Yes.
Yeah, so in our dream scenario, we would be able to use that space. It's a different owner. So we do have some time to talk to him next week or so. Maybe down the line, that could be an option for us. I'm not sure how quick we could put something together for that, but yeah, you're right. That's a great space. So we would love to use it eventually.
Well, I wasn't, I guess I wasn't thinking of using it for tables per se, but, or patrons, but I was thinking of, it makes a nicer access route, both from South Main Street and the parking lot to your space, to the middle of your space, as compared to walking from the parking lot next to the office, the colonial looking office building. It just makes a better procession. So in addition, if you have signage, you could incorporate that into a future meeting. That would be great. But if you could just find out, what is that? Is it an easement that you might have access to? Or could you get an agreement for access easement? I think it would make a great way to get to your to the core of your property, from, again, both from the South Main Street and the parking lot side.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. With that, Jen, would you summarize what we have accomplished and provide us with the direction of where we're going next?
Certainly. So the board has brought up some salient points that I think that the applicant, can work on until we would have to continue anyway, due to the fact that we're waiting on some additional comments from other departments. With the storm, we lost 3 to 5 full days where they would have commented on the site plan because it has been distributed, and includes fire and access and all of that. So I have proposed days to continue it. In addition, in the table of use regulations, the restaurant section is blank. There is no special permit required, except for how Tom just mentioned, if they want music. There's also a conflict there, in that the select board issues all the entertainment permits and licenses. So I would like to look back and see what we've done in similar situations, because we did not require, I don't believe, a special permit for dualies, but I'd like to check on that. And exactly what Clark said, I was going to mention, is that I worked with the MAPC and other members, including Select Board Kennedy. We worked with the MAPC on that parking study. So I do have access to that to get those numbers to the applicant. And as far as a peer review, we did not require it for the last applicant, because he only came in and did an informal. If the board wishes to do so, we could do a small firm. We just, John, the 3 of us didn't think it raised to the level where it was already on a parking area and they're bringing in an engineer. So I would look to the board if they wish to have, someone review the site plan. We can certainly assign somebody in the next week. So that's really where we are, I think, right?
Right. So Jen, when was the MAPC study done? Do you remember?
It was about 10 years ago.
Okay, so we definitely would want, we can use it as a piece of information, and I think it'll really help the applicant to get some idea of what it was 10 years ago. But realistically speaking, I think 10 years is too far out of time to be relevant for today.
Right.
And so we will require a parking study.
And agreed. And I also would just like to mention, though, that we have since looked at other studies in the past, probably 5 to 6 years since Christina has been here, because we did look into offering additional parking for people. So I'd like to pull on that information too. And then we can, and if you want a parking study, I don't know how the process would be with that, as far as if you want us to do it or ask the applicant to do it.
So I think first off, let's just move in sequence. So let's get the things that we have. Let's see what they tell us. Let's see what we might be missing. And then I think we would make the determination about whether we would ask to have a parking study, and then we would make the decision as to who would be responsible for doing it. But there's no I mean, this is not going to start up immediately, and we have time to be able to do this. So if we don't move too quickly, then we may save money. So that's what would be my strategy, is to get the information to everybody, see what it is, and then make a decision after that.
Okay. And so prior to the board continuing, I wanted to let you know that I don't see anybody in the audience that wish to speak on this matter. So that addresses the public hearing portion. If they do, I'll catch it. And then the dates that Lauren suggested that we could continue would be 11/17, 12/1, or 12/15. And I defer to the board and the applicant to see which date would possibly be best.
Can I ask you, do you have any idea what we have coming up in the next 3 weeks that would make sense to slot this in?
Well, it will depend on how our next hearing goes and when you would like to continue that too. I know that we've discussed that most likely that would be continued, not guessing. We also do have the rules and regulation. Tom, when did we have that? I think that's coming up the 17th. The 17th, right? So those are the two that I'm really aware of. So I think we could do 11/17 or the 12 date. I just lost my 12/1.
I anticipate the regulation one is going to take a little time.
Yes, I do too. Ms. Herman, would it be all right if we scheduled you for December 1st?
Yeah, I mean, that's
all right, because otherwise we might put you with like a sandwich, and it could be uncomfortable, actually, because we have a couple of really big things coming up.
Sure. No, totally understand. That is fine. 12/1 is fine.
Great. So we will get you the studies. We will, Jen and the permitting group will kibitz and figure out what is and what isn't as it relates to the village plan. And we will give you the information that we have, and we'll continue. So it will be the 1st of December. Can I get a motion to continue?
Motion to continue till December 1st.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right. Mr. Potter,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Mr. Callahan,
Aye.
Mr. Brewer,
Aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye. Thank you. And thank you very much for your presentation.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
All right, we need to get the site plan review hearing document put up for Mr. Grady to read.
There, can you see that?
Can you make it a little bigger?
How's that? That better?
All right, we're ready to rip?
We're ready to go.
All right, notice of public hearing, Cohasset Planning Board. Pursuant to MGL Chapter 40-A and 300-5.12 of the Cohasset zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a virtual public hearing on the Zoom platform, webinar ID 833-9052-9386, password 903635, on Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. for a site plan review for property being shown at Cohasset Assessor's Map D2-42-028, D2-42028A, and D243-003, 380, 390, and 400 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, Cohasset, Mass. 02025. The application is for the modification of a site plan approval for a mixed-use development, including approximately 30,000 square feet of commercial ground floor space with 20 residential apartment units above. The application is submitted by Cohasset Development Trust. A copy of the application plans and accompanying documents are on file in the town clerk's office at Cohasset Town Hall, 41 Highland Avenue, with office hours of Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Electronic copies of said application can be obtained by contacting Planning Director Lauren Lind by email at lind@cohassetmass.org. Any person interested or wishing to be heard on the application should access the virtual meeting at the time designated. Signed, Amy Glassmeyer, Chair, Planning Board.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. May I ask the applicant who will be representing the project?
This guy.
Hi, Amy, members of the board. I'm Jeff DeLisi. I'm here tonight with my client, Cohasset Development Trust, along with our engineers from Vertex, Andrew Shagnon, and Jason Pitty, I think, is on the phone.
All right, guys. Yep.
Who was that?
That was Eric. I muted him.
Oh, okay, okay. I couldn't see anyone or anything. Lauren, welcome back. Perfect timing. So we have just opened the hearing, and would you like to give us the plan of action for this discussion?
I don't know. Yeah, she may not have heard you.
Okay.
I think she's trying to,
Okay,
I'm gonna.
so Jen, can you, we have a peer review.
Oh, there
We
she is.
also- Okay, Lauren?
Hello,
Thank
good evening. I'm sorry, I'm on 2 Zooms right now. So I have advisory committee running on my laptop, so I'm on my phone here. Thank you, and I'm sorry for what I may have missed. So I understand the for 390 Chief Justice Cushing Highway has been opened. What we're going to do tonight, this process is a modification to an existing site plan review. So this came before the board it's been ongoing for several years. The most recent time this was before the board was in approximately 2019, when it was looking for whether it was a major or minor modification for some site changes. At the time, the board did agree to allow the applicant to move the building as a minor modification, but it was noted that the applicant would need to return to the board for subsequent modifications for further review. Due to the time that has elapsed and there's been several changes, the applicant has gone through various changes and discussions with the Sewer Commission and other boards and committees. Due to the nature and the time that has elapsed, we had requested that they submit an application as a major modification, and we are treating this application as such. So now tonight, we will hear from the applicant and their team about what they are, sort of the summary of what the changes are and what they're looking from the board. We also have Jim Reardon, our peer reviewer from Weston and Sampson, who has done an initial completeness report, who is prepared to report on that after the applicant speaks. And then at that time, we can take board comments. I will note that we lost some days last week due to the power outage, and therefore we did not have sufficient time for our interdepartmental board and committee comments to come in. So I would request that the board keep this hearing open so that we can make sure that we have adequate time to receive comments. I know that our water department, as well as our public safety comment, notified me that they would have forthcoming comments. They just didn't have time, given all of the events of last week, to get those to me in time for this hearing.
Thank you. So then we will begin with the applicant. And at first, I'd like to ask Mr. DeLisi, because there are some members on this board at this time that were not a part of the project when it began, could you do a 30,000-foot quick run through its life so that we get to 2019? Because then I think the majority of us will have been here, and then you can provide more detailed information. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that that's a great idea, Madam Chair. And I think Lauren did a very good job explaining very briefly kind of what has become a bit of a complex issue. I I think everybody's familiar with the property. The address is 380, 390, 400 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. It's the site that contains the building with the Stop and Shop supermarket, as well as the building with the Feng Shui restaurant. In June of 2018, and I'll start in 2018, that actually this was approved in 2010, and there was some litigation that ensued over a condition of approval, which was resolved. And then in 2018, the board issued a decision approving a modification to that approved 2010 site plan. And that modification was for the construction of a third building at the property. Specifically, in 2018, the approved two-story building contains a footprint of 30,000 square feet, and is proposed to have commercial uses on the first floor, and then 20 residential apartments on the second floor, 5 of which have been voluntarily deed restricted as affordable. In addition to the site plan approval by the planning board, prior to the issuance of a building permit, other town boards issued permits. The ZBA issued a special permit, the Conservation Commission issued a negative determination of applicability, and the Board of Health issued a septic permit for quite a large system that was to be located in 2 locations behind the building, behind an 8-foot high retaining wall, which held the system in place.
Mr. Tracy,
go ahead.
before you go forward, can you explain the ZBA, the Concom issues as you're going, since you've been with these boards? So what was the ZBA determination about?
Thank you. So a portion of the property is located in the Water Resources Protection Overlay Zoning District, and therefore special permits required for activities and uses within that area. In addition, the mixed use component required a special permit. And so the ZBA held a couple of hearings prior to the 2018 planning board site plan hearing. And it issued that special permit. Also, there are some resource areas on the site, which we don't believe are impacted by this project. However, it was necessary because the Conservation Commission had jurisdiction to file what's called a request for a determination of applicability, which essentially asks the Conservation Commission, is this something that is significant enough that you would require us to file a notice of intent application for a order of conditions? And the commission indicated that it did not rise to that level. So we received a negative determination of applicability. And then the Board of Health issued a septic permit, which obviously the Board of Health is the jurisdictional permitting authority for Title V issues. So that's kind of where we were with the permits. As our contractors began to prep for the foundation, they discovered characteristics in the soil in a portion of the area of the proposed foundation that were less than ideal upon which to build a foundation. And so also at that approximate time, which was around 2019, Stop and Shop asked us to consider slight modification to our travel lanes to allow safer access for their supermarket delivery trucks. And that request came in after the planning board approved its site plan modification in 2018. So as a result of the soil issue and Stop and Shop request, the planning board held a hearing on August 28th of 2019 and considered a proposal to move the foundation of the building about 19 feet closer to the rear property line at the Cook Estate. So naturally, moving the building would have site implications. And ultimately, in that hearing, even though the planning board, as Lauren indicated, voted to allow the foundation to be moved, and further voted that moving the foundation constituted a minor modification, the board was clear that it desired my client to engage the peer review process for an assessment of the impacts of moving the building and whether those impacts constituted minor work or a substantial change warranting a full modification of the decision. So we were incredibly grateful for the planning board to have voted to allow the building to be moved that 19 feet. We did not run afoul of any zoning issues or anything of that nature. And over the course of the months following the August 2019 hearing, our engineers submitted plans detailing changes that flowed from the moving of the building and engaged in a process of review commentary with the board's then peer review consultant, John Modulewski. That engineering process back and forth left relatively little stones unturned with respect to Mr. Modulewski's review of the consequential impacts of moving the building. But also during that time frame in 2019, a couple of other issues arose. One had to do with water looping. It still was required that we provide some detail on bringing water to the building. And then also there arose an issue concerning, and this is the most significant, the septic permit regarding wastewater disposal. That issue involving the septic permit, I know I'm speaking fast, so if I'm talking too fast, please stop me, caused Mass DEP to take jurisdiction over all wastewater involving the site, and further necessitated my clients to pursue the concept of sewering the property, which, if allowed, would be a significant environmental enhancement and would further impact the site due to the necessary installation that would be required if sewer were approved, the installation of subsurface sewer infrastructure and the removal of the septic system and the retaining wall behind the building. So as a result of that threshold site issue, and at the recommendation of Mr. Modulewski, the planning board in 2009, which was to be fall of
2019, correct?
Excuse me. Yes. Thank you. 2019. The planning board indefinitely canceled a discussion on the topic of whether the changes as a result of the modification were minor or not, and whether a site plan modification was warranted. That discussion was tabled in the fall of 2019 until such time as the concern over the wastewater disposal was solved with the Board of Sewer Commissioners and Mass DEP. So we engaged the process with sewer commissioners and Mass DEP, and meanwhile, the construction on the building continued. And ultimately, landing in the year 2021, a bunch of significant events occurred. Number one, we recorded a deed restriction, and that restricted 5 of the 25 rental units as for lower and moderate income housing. And my understanding is that may allow for the entire 20 units to be counted towards the town's affordable housing inventory. Also, the water commissioners approved of our water infrastructure design, and the building was sprinklered, which was significant, I believe, for fire suppression purposes. Additionally, and very significantly, the Board of Sewer Commissioners entered into an agreement with my client that would allow for the sewering of the property. Most recently, Mass DEP entered into an administrative consent order with my client to allow the use of 20 residential bedrooms to connect with Stop and Shop's septic system on a temporary basis until the sewer connection is constructed and activated. And so, given all of this, which is a lot, and if the board would like, I could synopsize that in writing. I probably should have done so as I'm sitting here thinking about it. But it's now necessary for us to complete this process with the planning board of determining whether any changes to the site plan which have occurred since the 2018 approval, other than moving the building, which has already been determined, whether any of those changes are substantial or minor, and if substantial, to consider modification of the site plan approval. So our engineers have, and I think one of our engineers should be promoted into this conversation so that he can present, and might not be. And that would be Andrew Shagnon.
I'm promoting him right now.
Thank you very much. So they will quantify those differences for the board, because I think the concept here is not to engage in a full new review of the plan, but to quantify the differences and to consider those. As Lauren indicated, Weston and Sampson has been retained and to make recommendations to the board. That process is pending, and we understand that this hearing will not be closed and will not be voted this evening, and not until Weston and Sampson completes its review process. So our goal tonight is primarily to outline to the board the differences to the plan since the 2018 approval, and to seek any initial feedback, I suppose. In the meantime, we do have an ask of the board, and we have a concern that sometime in the month of December, the asphalt plant is going to likely close, as it does every year, for the winter. We've raised this topic with Weston and Sampson, and even though we're not, we understand that the board will not be closing the hearing, we are asking the board to allow us to install the subsurface sewer infrastructure and allow us to install curbing and asphalt the site. And so the last thing that we want really is a safety issue presented from partially torn up pavement and exposed construction during the winter months and snow storm events. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or I'm happy to also just say, take it over, Andrew, from Vertex.
So before we actually, so we have Mr. Shagnon and we also have Mr. Pretty. Is Mr. Pretty with Mr. Shagnon?
He is. They're both
All right.
engineers at
Okay.
Vertex, but I believe Mr.
Okay.
Shagnon will be speaking.
Okay, so let me ask, I want to be sure I got this correct. You said regarding the asphalt placement and sewer infrastructure. So are you saying that between now and, let's say, January 1, you're planning to extract the subsurface material and put the sewer line down that will then be connected to the sewer? Or are you speaking of the septic?
So what we're, and Andrew can get into this probably more competently, Andrew, but what you're aware of where the new building is located because it's there. What there is presently in the ground exposed a tank which will serve for grease trap purposes. It will serve for pumping of the waste from the building towards the direction of the Stop and Shop septic system, which is closer to Chief Justice Cushing Highway in that corner of the building of Stop and Shop. There would also be a separate pipe within that trench that also contemplates the sewer connection. And since we're digging the trench, we're just looking for the ability to put those pipes down, backfill, and pave. Our biggest concern here is the paving, and not being able to do that after a certain date.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
So it sounds as if Mr. Shagnon will be the individual to speak next.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Andrew Shagnon from the Vertex Companies. I'm a licensed engineer in the state of Massachusetts. I'm here representing Cohasset Development Trust in the matter before you. Madam Chair, with your permission, I would like to share my screen, if that is all right.
You may, yes. Thank you.
As Attorney DeLisi mentioned, I'll give just a brief overview. I mean, he certainly covered quite a bit of information about the history. I think when you see what I have to present, the actual changes to the site plan are, fairly minor in nature. The first thing that I'll take a look at with you is just quickly some of the parking adjustments. This is the parking as you would see it if you went out there today.
Oh, we can't see anything right now? We can't see anything, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe you, yes. We can't. It's not.
I apologize. I had it on my screen, looked like it was sharing. I had not hit the share button yet. I apologize.
That happens to all of us.
Just before Andrew goes on, I just wanted to clarify, I think I misspoke. I think I said that the building was moved 19 feet. At one point in time, it might have been proposed to be moved 19 feet, but I think in actuality, the move that was approved and done was only 5 feet. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and to add to that, all of which is depicted on the plans that have been submitted to the board. As I was saying, there's quite a bit of history to the site, but I think when we walk through, I only have a few quick slides. I don't think that they will take very much time at all. I will give a little bit more detail about the components that Attorney DeLisi was just talking about that we would hope to be able to install this year. The image that you see before you right now is the parking as it stands today. The building that is shaded dark here is the building that is under construction that we've been talking about. There has been a little bit more done. I know that, previously the fire department approved some pavement around the limits of this, but in general, this is the parking layout that is there today. I'd like to just kind of bring everybody's attention to this main exit and entrance area, and really these parking bays that are located on the east side of the site here. I'm going to flip to my next slide, which will show you what the changes are. But I think if we kind of focus in the area in front of and around this building, it will become fairly evident what the changes are. As Attorney DeLisi mentioned, some of these changes were precipitated by the request from Stop and Shop for us to take a look at some of the turning templates and how their vehicles were able to circumvent throughout the site. If you look at the drawing that you have in front of you, the green that you see in front of you is the proposed. You can see underneath that, the gray is the original layout that was there. I'll just flip quickly back to the previous slide. And so, as you can see, there's been some adjustments made here. This line has been pushed forward a little bit, which pushed each one of the islands forward slightly. These parking bays were extended slightly. The drive aisle has been moved to the west and now loops back a little bit. You can see the island changes that were made here. There had been a pass through right here, which now has been closed up. In addition to that, a row of parking will be added to the front of the building. As we look further over to the east, you can see there was a little bit of extension of parking here, some island changes in these areas, and the configuration of the parking behind the Stop and Shop, which had once been west-east, now we're looking to go north-south. And again, all of these changes were precipitated by discussions with Stop and Shop and some of the turning templates that happen around them. We've talked a little bit, and I'll show you some more detail, but behind the building where we eliminated the septic system, we've also added a little bit of parking back here. The results of this, and as presented in the information that was given to the board, is that there's no substantial change to any of the zoning or site plan requirements on the site. You still meet all of your parking requirements here. And as a matter of fact, we've added a little bit more parking. You still meet all of your handicap parking requirements. We've in fact added a few more handicap parking spaces too. So we actually exceed parking numbers and handicap parking numbers here. We have submitted a full set of turning templates for the town to their review. We actually think that this, we've widened up some of the turning templates, again, at the request of Stop and Shop. So we believe that absolutely safe, safe circulation throughout the site is maintained by these minor changes. Pedestrian access has been maintained throughout the site, and in some instances, we've actually even moved some islands closer to where that pedestrian access is, so we maintain, safe pedestrian access throughout the site. There is slightly more impervious area in this scenario than there was in the previous scenario, but still well below the coverage requirements of the town. So as we look at these changes, there's been some slight shifts, some additional parking, and that's really the crux of it. I'm going to move forward and just look at some of the sanitary system updates that Attorney DeLisi was talking about. The original design, and here's the proposed building that's under construction now in gray. The original design anticipated a septic system which would be constructed to the north of the building and in the back. As was just presented to you, this septic system is no longer going to be needed. We think that that's a great improvement to the site. And in its place, what is going to happen, if you look at the east end of the proposed building, you can see in green, there is a proposed septic holding tank. What is going to happen?
Excuse me, Mr. Shagnon, can you please make the font larger? It's hard to see. Thank you.
Is that a little bit better?
Much better. You can make it a little smaller than that. So you can. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, so you see this green rectangle as a holding tank, and the purpose of this is, as was mentioned previously, DEP has approved an interim condition right now, and then a permanent condition going forward. In the interim condition, sewerage will come into this tank. It will be pumped from this tank into the Stop and Shop leach field, the leach field in front of Stop and Shop, which was previously approved. I'm certainly happy to talk more in detail about that if anybody is overly interested, but very quickly, just so that you understand, the design criteria for the Stop and Shop at the time we built it was based on Title V. The actual flow data, since it has been constructed, is significantly less than what was anticipated by Title V. And so DEP has determined, at least in an interim basis, we can send the sewerage from this building to that leach field in front of Stop and Shop. Ultimately, when the sewer extension is constructed, and I'll show a little bit more detail on all of this at the end, but when the sewer extension is constructed, we will pump from this tank instead of to the Stop and Shop leaching field out to the highway and into the sewer extension. So this tank is one component of the revised septic system. I also want to just point out this rectangle that's right next to it, which has been referred to in a lot of our submission materials as a grease trap, which is in fact acting as an oil water separator. There was a code change since we were before you last time, a building code change that now requires an oil water separator for a sump from the elevator. And so this has been added to the design. This is the oil water separator that will come out of the sump of the elevator. I want to be clear. At some point in the past, I believe there was some discussion about a true grease trap, which would be for a restaurant or something like that. That is not the case here. There's not a restaurant or anything like that anticipated for this building. There's not a grease trap anticipated. This is actually an oil water separator associated with that. And as I mentioned, I'll show you a little bit more detail on the discharge for this in 1 second. The third thing, so we have the kind of the site plan changes that we talked about. We just covered the sewer changes, and I just want to touch base on some stormwater updates. As I mentioned, the revisions to this end up in a slight increase in impervious area. In addition to that, Previously, this red box in here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Tell me as we go along if it makes sense to zoom in even more. This red box represented the stormwater infiltration system, which was part of the submission before, to the south of the proposed building. With the elimination of the septic infiltration system to the north, we decided it would actually be better for us to move this system to the north. The soils to the north of the building are in fact better suited for infiltration. And so we've changed the infiltration system from the south of the building to the north of the building. It has been resized to make sure that it can handle the minor increases in impervious area that we added from those parking and layout changes that I showed you. These blue dots that you see adjacent to it and as well as further down here, these blue dots represent stormwater quality improvements to the site. So the ones that are local to the infiltration system take any of the added impervious that was here, make sure that they get appropriate water quality treatment before they go into the infiltration system. And then we added some additional treatment because of some of the changes in the main parking lot at the end of line before we have the discharge here. So those three components really constitute the changes to the site from the original approval. We have the site layout modifications based on some shifting of the islands and some additional parking. We have the elimination of the septic system and the introduction of a sewer extension now. And we have some minor drainage changes to help accommodate the other changes that we made. I'm gonna flip back just real briefly to my previous slide. This tank, the green tank that we talked about, is on site. This tank needs to be on site. As I said, it's a code required tank. And then just to hopefully provide a little bit of clarification, and I know this is small, but the proposal, as I just described it a minute ago, that tank is represented here. What will happen is 2 pipes will be installed. They will go to where this circle is, which is the entrance of the infiltration system for the Stop and Shop. I'm going to provide a little bit of clarification to what Attorney DeLisi said a minute ago. Why 2 pipes? 1 pipe is actually going to be an active pipe, and 1 pipe is actually going to be a spare. In case there was anything needed at any point in the future, we want to make sure that there's a spare pipe in there. Currently, or once occupancy is allowed for the building, again, just to clarify, we will pump from this chamber to the infiltration system here. Once the sewer extension is approved, that connection will be disconnected from the septic system in front of Stop and Shop, and it will then extend out to the sewer extension, which will be in the highway. So what Attorney DeLisi was talking about today, we would like permission, and by the way, these pipes from this point on will also be 2 pipes, and one will be when we finally have the sewer extension, one will be an active pipe and one will be a spare pipe. So what we'd like to be able to install now before the weather changes and get paved such that we don't have unpaved areas, snow storage issues, paving issues all throughout the the winter. What we'd like to get in the ground is these 2 pipes from the tank to the beginning of the septic system, and then again from here out to the grass strip in front of the roadway, such that when these can be tied in, we don't have to go back and dig up the parking lot, as well as this tank, which is going to be the pump tank, this tank, which is the oil separator that we talked about. And then lastly, and again, really from a snow management and snow storage point of view and safety for the site, I'm going to go all the way back to this. And they just want to pave this. Right now, there's only a 20-foot strip of paving right here. So, again, just wanted to kind of clarify that. They're looking for permission to put some pavement down behind the building for snow storage and maintenance throughout the winter. The 2 tanks so that they can get that paved over and there won't be issues over the winter. And then finally, the 2 lines that will go to the septic system and then ultimately to the roadway. And with that, I believe that's what I have to present to you tonight. I'm certainly open to answering any questions.
I think, so Mr. Pretty will not be speaking.
He will not. So Jason Pretty is a design engineer that works with me. I'll be honest with you. He's here to save my bacon. If you ask me some questions that I might not know the detail for, I'm hopeful that he's going to.
So I'm prepared to do that. So don't worry. I'm teasing. So I think that what we would do now is to actually move to our peer review before we have discussion of the planning board so that we have the full complement of information. So Mr. Reardon, would you like to conduct the peer review?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be happy to do that. Permission to share my screen, please.
Jim, you should have permission. Thank you.
Hopefully that's visible.
It is. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, so this is a summary of the peer review that we completed over the last couple of days. This was really a peer review related to completeness of the application. We received materials on, or we produced the peer review on October 29th. We received the materials earlier that week. And so the purpose of our review at that time was mainly to take a look at them and make sure that they met the application requirements for completeness, and that in general, if we noticed anything that was, of a technical concern, that we would raise that. We were subsequently asked to take a look at the trench that Mr. Shagnon was just referring to take a look at the detail of that trench that was going to house the sewer line for the on-site connection that's proposed to be temporary, and then the more permanent connection to the sewer line once that becomes available. So we took a look at both those things. That trench detail we just took a look at very recently. So that part of the peer review was produced in a separate memo that was provided on November 2nd, just yesterday. Materials that we looked at were collected between October 21 and November 1st. So the November 1st materials that we received included fire truck access turning template and the wetlands RDAs that were referred to earlier, as well as the information regarding the trench line. We had a similar design that we had taken a look at from the October 21 materials, but there is an update to those that we received on November 1st. And I will say that the materials that we received subsequently were very similar to those that we had looked at. Frankly, we didn't notice any significant difference in them. I bring up the fire truck access and the wetlands RDA only to point out that we have not reviewed those materials yet. We've just received them. We just got them earlier this week on Monday, and have not been asked to review those in detail yet. A list of materials that we reviewed from October 21 is provided with the peer review memo, the first peer review memo that we developed on the 29th. So I'll go over our findings from the October 29th peer review first. So we took a look at the site plan and the stormwater. We requested, as part of our peer review, clarification of the stormwater treatment unit and the configuration that's being installed. There were some inconsistencies that we found in those materials. The type of the system was referred to as, in one spot, as being a vortex system, and then later on, I think, as a storm scepter. That's something that will need to be clarified in, the more formal submission, during next submission of materials, I should say. Confirmation of the data used for calculation and the HydroCAD model. So again, there were just some inconsistencies in that data, not necessarily huge inconsistencies, but some things that do need to be cleared up regarding things like the size of the watershed, I think the amount of impervious surface, a few other things like that. Clarification of the test pit data used. Again, just a couple of inconsistencies that we need to see clarified, and the O&M procedures for stormwater also need to be provided to us and clarified. I think this issue has more or less been addressed, although we have yet to review the material that we've received. In the site plan materials that we originally received back on the 21st, we recognized that there were wetlands nearby that had the potential to be impacted, but we had not received information about the applicant's RDA at that time. We understand since the applicant has submitted for an RDA and received that subsequently. So we're going to take a look at that as well to make sure it's consistent with the current design. Traffic and circulation. So part of the materials we received included a traffic impact assessment, or sometimes referred to as a traffic impact study. It appears to include an appropriate level of detail for this particular site and this particular application. Again, we haven't looked at it, we haven't delved into it technically too much yet. We did note that, that a fire truck turning template was provided on November 1st. We have not taken a close look at that yet. That, I think, was in part provided to us. We noted in our completeness review on the 29th that there hadn't been a fire truck turning template provided, and that we had some questions about truck egress and entrance onto the site. Since then, like I say, we have received the fire truck turning template. We're going to take a look at that. We, again, only got that on November 1st. Some additional turning template information has been requested and is yet to be received. I imagine we'll receive that in fairly short order. Environmental site review. So it is noted that there are a couple of sites adjacent to the site proposed for Cohasset Plaza. Some of these adjacent sites have chlorinated VOCs on them. Particularly, there is, I think, a dry cleaner housed nearby there. So there may be PCE from that site. Plumes of CVOCs, if they get into the groundwater, can certainly migrate. So we raised some concerns about that, or questions about that, I should say, is probably more accurate. Even though a site might be closed, it's still possible that that migration could occur. So we would want the applicant, or we would request that the applicant confirm management of the soils, and if any dewatering is necessary at the site, to make sure that those, that if such VOCs exist, that they don't cause a problem. Finally, the trench detail. So again, we were asked to take a look at that this week and receive materials on Monday regarding the trench detail or the updates to the trench detail. From our review, we believe that the trench appears to be constructible and appropriate for the proposed use. We did note, as we were looking through some of the other materials, we would request that the applicant provide operation procedures during power outages. We understand that the tank, the 10,000 gallon tank that was referred to earlier, is proposed to remain in place, and that it will be retrofitted so that it is compartmentalized. The idea would be that I believe that one compartment would be used during normal operation, and that there would be a separate compartment that would provide additional capacity in the event of a power outage. It's understood that Cohasset is somewhat susceptible to those, and has happened recently here that sometimes power outage can last for a couple of days. The proposed compartmentalized tank would then provide a capacity to hold wastewater for a period of perhaps a couple of days. This is something that's important because wastewater will need to be pumped due to the grade at the site and the grade of the piping. So therefore there needs to be a place to store it if those electric pumps go out. That concludes the findings from our peer review, and I am available to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riordan. Lauren Lind, would you direct what we should do next?
Certainly. So at this time, I would ask if the board members have any comments or questions, material that they would like to identify for the applicant to return with. That would be an appropriate time now. And that time we can discuss a continuation, as we've already identified that this hearing will be continued. But first, it would be helpful for the applicant to know if there's any outstanding material already identified that the board would like to make known. That way they can be prepared.
All right, so we'll go through the planning board members, then we'll have public comments. And then we will proceed with identifying a future date. So let's begin with Mr. Potter.
We appear to have lost Mr. Potter.
I see. Well, we heard him have a sort of squeal, so maybe he had to run for some reason. Let's see if he comes back. In the meantime, Mr. Grady.
This point in time, I have no questions. I'm not prepared to do anything until I see the Weston Sampson report anyway. So I have no comments to make at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Callahan.
I'm sitting here amazed that I first dealt with this project probably 30 years ago on the Conservation Commission when this whole plaza was being built, and this third building was even proposed at that time. It's amazing that I'm still here dealing with it in another capacity. Jeff DeLisi, I may have missed this. Is there any further relief by these changes needed under Article 14 for the Water Resource District?
Good question, and I don't know the answer to that.
I'm assuming there was a special permit under that article in the past, and I'm wondering if that needs to be amended too. With some of these changes. But.
Yeah, so I'll look into that. What I can tell you is that in my preparations for tonight's hearing, I went back and reviewed the correspondence between our peer review engineer at the time, who was John Modulewski, and our and your engineer, I'm sorry, your engineer and our engineer corresponded. And what I read was that question was flagged by Mr. Modulewski because the issue really that triggered it was the movement of the building and the changing of the site might change the stormwater runoff issues and infiltration issues. And he specifically asked us to review whether it triggered any requirement under section 14 of the zoning bylaw. And the correspondence that I saw back and forth, and I'll try and find it for you, indicated that I believe Mr. Modulewski was satisfied with a comment that was in response to that, which indicated that while we were in fact increasing impervious area, that it still was under the thresholds that would somehow trigger issues under Article 14. And I'll see if I can find that for you, Tom.
Yeah, and let's, I mean, that was then, this is now. Let's just make sure that that's, now with regard to lot coverage, if I read the site plan correctly, the proposed lot coverage will be 74.3%, is that correct?
I'll defer to Andrew on that one.
Yeah, I do not believe that is correct. I think that the and this goes back to the question that was.
I'm reading from your cover page of your site plan. So
yeah, I don't have it in front of me. I will. My recollection is that the special permit approved up to 60% coverage, and that we are at, I want to say, 58.6% right now. We were at 58.4 or something like that in the minor changes. If something there says 70-something%, I'm going to have to apologize and say that.
All right. Well, yeah, the reason I'm asking is because of the new clearing bylaw we have that passed last spring that might require a special permit if you're over, I think it's 85% total. So, you know, that's buildings as well as other impervious materials. So just check on that one.
I will double check that.
All right. And then, you know, as I read these materials today, I see this triggered by the sewer connection, and I'm kind of surprised because on the master plan committee, we occasionally keep our eye on what's going on about sewering with the other towns. And I hadn't heard that this was actually happening. And I confirmed that with, you know, our director of public works today, that a sewer connection's been approved by the sewer commission, and that's fine. But and the need for the 20 units is of course great for the town's affordable housing count, but I'm a little concerned about, you know, this temporary shortcut of using the septic system. And you say DEP has actually approved that? I mean, can we see that approval if it was given?
So Tom, Mass DEP and the property owner entered into an administrative consent order, which contemplated, they wanted to make sure there was a lot, you know, they wanted to make sure that we in fact had capacity, and it contemplated that we can do this. Mass DEP has exclusive jurisdiction over wastewater issues. As far as Mass DEP approving of the actual plan, that process likely will conclude. So the detailed plan that shows how the wastewater gets from point A to point B, that detail will likely conclude at some point, probably between this meeting and the next meeting. But they had not yet approved of that exact detailed plan.
Well, you know, my concern is what's the rush, and maybe it's premature for us to be ruling on this. How long is temporary intended to be?
Well, just also to amplify on my prior comment, we did receive an email from DEP today that indicated that they wanted us to just put a note on the plan and indicated that once that is done, it would rule on the plan. As far as how temporary, I don't, right now, we have no tenants. So it's not as if we do this and immediately we're going to be bringing folks into the building. The concern is that we can't really do the sewer extension and commence that work until the spring. And it's going to take a period of time after that. And so the concept with respect to when we could occupy the building, we were looking and hoping that it would be some point this winter. We're receiving a lot of telephone calls of interest from disabled veterans and other folks who have particular need to get in there. And so we're trying to accommodate those needs.
Well, but the sewer extension is being solely done and funded by your client, correct?
The sewer extension, the work is being done by us and is being funded by us at our expense.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm concerned about amending this site plan based on temporary arrangements, but you know, we'll I guess we can condition that, I suppose, but that's my major concern. But I'd like to see as part of the application process, whatever you're getting from DEP, that's okaying this, and whatever you've gotten from the sewer commission to okay this.
Sure, I'd be happy to provide that to you, Tom.
All right, thank you. That's it. That's all I have for the moment.
All right, thank you. Mr. Colery.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, it's been a couple of years since we all saw this, and I wanted to go by the site, and I have some concerns. I also want to say that I'm excited about the town getting some more affordable housing units as a member of the Affordable Housing Steering Committee. But I also get concerned when projects get rushed, like the rush to put in some lines temporary if they are, or otherwise before the batch plants close. I guess first question, I guess I have a few here. Did you say, Mr. Delis, did you say exclusive jurisdiction goes to Mass DEP?
Yeah, so Mass DEP has exclusive jurisdiction over wastewater issues and is the permit granting authority for wastewater on this site, okay? That authority is, of course, subject to any required local approvals. And so the local approval in this instance would have been, for instance, the sewer commission. Another local approval would be your board. But with respect to assessing whether it's viable to connect on a temporary basis into Stop and Shop system, whether it's safe to do that, and whether it's allowable, the DEP has that exclusive jurisdiction, has made that very clear to both our camp and the town. With respect to the concept of a temporary connection into Stop and Shop system, DEP has assessed the capacity and has determined that we are not permitted to connect more than 20 residential bedrooms, and we cannot connect any commercial at all. And so what they have done is engaged in a process whereby we're required to report to them and that issue is checked and enforced by Mass DEP.
Okay. So ultimately, they do the inspections and make sure that soils are compacted and systems were put in place properly.
Yeah, yep,
So it's out of the Board of Health's hands in the town of Cohasset.
that's my understanding, yes.
So did they sign off on the tank that's already been installed in the ground? All your plans reference a proposed tank, but the tank's already in the ground.
Yeah, so the plans reference the tank. They have not approved of the tank. That is going to happen in the coming days, I'm sure. They have the plans in their hand and they're in the middle of reviewing them now.
Did you know that the tank was in the ground
Yes,
without DEP approval yet? I mean, for
yes.
inspection purposes, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I was informed that that had occurred, yes.
What had
Yeah.
occurred? The tank
That
went in
the
the ground
tank
or
was-
it was
that the-
inspected?
That the tank was put in, it was installed into the ground.
Oh, no, it's definitely installed. I just was curious about who approved it and who inspected it.
I can only defer to anybody else, who might have information to that, that's on this call, but I
Wanted
don't.
to ask if Mr. Reardon with the Weston and Sampson peer review, did you happen to observe that the tank was already in the ground when was that a site visit on November 1st or?
So we have not done a site visit. All we have done is receive materials. And so we're looking at written materials to do our review. We were told that the tank had been installed and that it was, my understanding is that it's not in use. It's currently uncovered, but the area for the tank has been excavated and the tank has been put in place. And that's basically what I know about the tank.
Yeah, it's not being used.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get the not being used part. There's nobody in the building. I also noticed Mr. Reardon mentioned something about some contamination in the soil and maybe I don't know if it's a bit too late in this process, but was there a 21E done on the site?
I do not know if there was a 21E done on the site. I would only be speculating if I were to answer that question. I can look into that for you.
Okay.
We have no reason to believe that there was any contamination on the site.
Yeah, if I could,
yep.
If I could offer some clarification, we know that there are closed sites adjacent to the site and I believe up gradient of the site. And to our knowledge, there has been no testing of any soils or groundwater at the site. It's possible that due to the nature of the contamination of the up gradient sites, that that hazardous materials, CVOCs, could migrate to the site, but that is essentially a possibility and speculation, not that it actually has occurred. So our recommendation was to confirm that it hasn't occurred. If there's any dewatering to be done at that site, because that would certainly be important for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I was just asking because in sites this size, usually, 21Es are done, especially where it's across the street from a gas station and we're going to have people living on the site. You want to look out for everybody in the community. You had mentioned, Mr. Reardon, and Madam Chair, I apologize if my questions are pretty short, answers may be a bit longer. If I could get a few more minutes, I apologize.
Yeah, you're actually fine within limits.
Thank you. What is, Mr. Reardon, what is an RDA? I'm just not familiar with that term.
Oh, a request for determination of applicability. It was, sorry, I can't recall whether it is Mr. Shagnon or Mr. Delise who referred to it earlier on. It's generally something that's used in wetlands permitting. It's a type of application and approval. And the purpose of it is to determine whether further wetlands permitting is needed for the site. So in other words, whether the wetlands rules and regulations, excuse me, apply to the site and the work that's being proposed.
Just curious for myself and other members of the public that might be listening in might not have known what that was. So, Mr. Delise, I also heard you reference something about 20 bedrooms, like the DEP, you guys had, I thought, brokered some kind of deal that would let them ship off 20 bedrooms of waste to the Stop and Shop septic system. Have we seen a floor plan or a layout of this 20 residential units that will be on the second floor of this building? Do we have that? I haven't seen it.
I think that was provided to the board with the application for the 2018 site plan modification, which ultimately was approved. But I'm sure if you'd like to see that, I'm happy to get that for you.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear for the record. You said 20 bedrooms. Did you mean the 20 apartments? Because there could be 3 bedrooms in one apartment, 2 bedrooms in another.
No. So the building has 20 residential apartments, rental apartments on the second floor with a total of 28 bedrooms. The Department of Environmental Protection, in analyzing our request is to utilize Stop and Shop system, determine that we're not permitted to exceed the use of more than 20 of those 28 bedrooms into that system. And so that was the mechanism that was kind of outlined in this document with the department as to how to enforce that and what they want from us to report to ensure that we don't send more than 20 bedrooms to the system.
And I think Mr. Callahan asked for a copy of that, correct?
Yes, he did. Yep. So would you like floor plans?
Yeah, if they haven't been provided, if they have, I must not have looked far enough into the file. I spent a couple hours because, it's been a couple of years since this was before us, and I know it was meant to come back in May and it got discontinued or postponed again, so.
This is a new application from 2018, so I think we should have everything that's relevant to this application and the relief requested. We can't rely on a past record that is now closed.
Okay, I'll provide them. Yep.
And just a couple other points and I'll try to wrap it up here. So is DEP going to be on site to inspect these sewer lines and the subterranean grades that might go underneath said sewer lines?
I'm
asking about soils compacted and.
Yeah, so I cannot, I don't know the answer to that question either, Paul. I don't want to, lead you astray. I believe that the agreement provides a mechanism for inspections so that they can verify what has been done. And I'm fairly certain that that's the case.
Okay.
I'll provide the documentation to you.
Thank you. So I shop there. I'm a resident in town and I spend some time there. Sometimes with my kids, sometimes not, but there's been some sinkholes. Could one of your engineers speak to what happened with the sinkholes in the parking lots?
I don't know, Andrew, if you're able to.
I am not. It's the first that I've heard about it. It's not something I'm aware of, but I certainly would be willing to take a look at it if these were pointed out to us, but it's not something that I've been made aware of previously.
Where were they, Paul? Out of curiosity, because there used to be a pond in the middle of that parking lot when we dealt with this at Concom 30 years ago. Where are the
I've
sinkholes?
actually, I've seen a couple since. One is probably center location in the middle of this building, out closer towards where the caution tape is. There's also a truck that said, I mean, a sign that says no trucks. I don't know exactly what it means. Could explain to me what the no trucks mean. I drive a truck, but I don't know if you mean semis or tractor trailers. So the signage isn't great, but the gravel doesn't seem to be holding. That has been placed out front. And I guess to wrap it up, the previous conditions that were approved 3 years ago called for that, I don't know how to say it, like a retention area out front, and now we're looking to move it to the back. So was that soil like pervious in nature and not suitable for adequate parking? And was the parking lot inspected as well? Like we would, want to see what kind of soils we use there in the parking lot if we're having sinkholes already and we're not even, we're a couple of months into the construction project here,
Yeah, so I can't answer the question about whether or not there were inspections on the parking lot. What I can tell you is that the parking lots in front of the building were appropriate for infiltration, but not as well infiltrating as the soils in the back, which is why the septic system was located in the back. We wanted the septic system at the area where the soils were the best infiltrating. Now that that septic system has been eliminated, it made sense for us to take a look, both from a soils point of view as well as the mechanics from taking, the water off the roof and actually getting it to the drainage system. That's why we moved it. There was nothing, I wouldn't say there was anything wrong with the soils in the front of the building for infiltration, but they certainly, we think the soils in the back of the building have a higher capacity to be able to infiltrate. Again, I don't know about sinkholes. I could take a look at it. I do know that if you have a construction site and you have gravel that is exposed to the elements, particularly if people are driving on it and construction vehicles are driving on it, there certainly is the potential to have problems associated with that. It is one of the reasons why we'd love to be able to get the site buttoned up and paved before the winter, so that those type of issues don't continue to happen throughout the winter.
Well,
Well,
my
again,
concern is that maybe,
that?
But
Yeah.
Tom,
I'm
please,
sorry.
Mr. O'Leary, continue.
my concern is that was that soil properly, again, we're inviting young families to take up residence here in this building, and we'll be walking across the parking lot to Stop and Shop to get their groceries and, go about the rest of their business among town. And, we want to make sure that the site is, I'm either shocked or I just can't believe it. Like who is the responsible party to inspect the parking area, and when it's paved, and now we're looking at blacktop in front of the building, and I just can't believe it was, like a lot of things were done on this project, like for example, the tank was installed and it, now come before us and say, hey, can we put this tank in the ground? I mean, it says on your plans over and over again, it's proposed, but it's already in the ground. So it just causes a little bit of concern for the town and the residents and the future residents that are going to enjoy this space. I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful building and I'm excited about it, but I just want to make sure that we're delivering a good product to the people that are going to be, living and raising their families there. So I think you got the gist of it. If somebody could tell me if somebody is the authority to inspect the parking lots as well as the subsurface underneath.
So Paul, can I make a recommendation that as a condition of the continuation of this project and our working with them, that we make a condition about subsoil investigations and go back in the records and see what we have versus what we might be able to have?
Yes, please.
Okay, so that please keep that in mind. So let's move to Mr. Brewer.
So my understanding is that this is a cleanup modification to the original site plan as modified in 2018, 2019. for moving the building. And my recollection for moving the building was that was basically all that they had asked for at that time. And everything else that was going to change or could change would be covered at some subsequent meeting. This one. And I don't think it matters whether it's a major or a minor modification. At this point, we've got a publicly noticed meeting. Any changes, it's a modification to the original decision. So whether they're all major or all minor or a mixture of both. Can I just ask the question of council for publicly noticing a major modification to a site plan like this? Is there anything else that would have had to have been done other than the reading of a public notice and opening of a public hearing with the planning board for site plan modification? Is there anything else that we would have to do? Major or
No,
minor?
it would be the same legal ad regardless, whether it's modification or a brand new site plan application.
So we're covered, whether it's major or minor. And what I've heard and what I've seen in the documents, it seems to be focused on pipes and drainage and some islands as the extent of the changes. But I don't think our consultant, Jim Reardon from Weston and Sampson, has all the information that he would need to report to us 10 years later from, or 11 years later from the original decision, that what has been done is done in accordance with that original decision, and what is proposed for changes don't conflict with that original decision or meet zoning requirements, things like that. So I think it would be important for Jim Reardon to have a set of documents from the original decision, as well as the original decision, so that he can report back to the board on what has been done, and are there areas that the applicant hasn't identified as being a change or a modification from what was originally approved. That is going to be important. I certainly can't do it, but I don't have the documentation from 11 years ago. And we need our consultant, the town's consultant, to confirm that zoning has been met, the number of parking spots have been met, and that there aren't any assumptions about what was approved 11 years ago by the applicant that may or may not be have not been reported back to us as a part of the modification session that we're in right now.
Mr. Brewer, could I stop you for just 1 second to see if Ms. Lind has something that might inform what you're talking about?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to speak to that item. We did give Mr. Reardon several of the documents from the background history. We'll be happy to give him as much information as necessary. And the intent was to have him do the comprehensive zoning review as well. But as a first portion, because of the complication of this site and the history, we had him do a completeness report to begin with, also because he is, as well as several staff members, changed over since this last was before us. Jim is a new peer review, and he was picking up sort of where another peer review engineer had left off. So the completeness review is the first step.
Right. And I don't think it would hurt to just give Modulewski a call just to check in and say what you're doing and how you're doing it, and see if he had any suggestion for you. But that's entirely your call.
Clark, just to jump on, if I may.
I just rather go through my list. I'd rather go through my list, Jeff, because I want to make sure that I'm on record to have what I think is important. So the architectural plans, Jim, you definitely want to see those in relation to the engineering plans. And there were some other sort of special features about the original decision, like a weight pad over on Sawyer Street. I think I saw somebody installing something over there which should trigger the light at the Stop and Shop onto 3A and allow intervals for people to take a left or a right out of Sawyer Street. But I haven't seen any documentation that supports that's been done and that it works. And I think maybe we need a sign there that indicates that there's something there that will help the flow of traffic out of Sawyer Street. I do see the curbing for the crosswalk and that the planned walkway that connects all three buildings. I can see something there, but what I see is white paint. I'd like Jim to help the applicant with a specification for and a material or layout for that white paint bar that might look a little better and hold up more, because white paint, there's no spec. I don't know what it is. Is it going to last 6 months or could it last 10 years? So I think that's important to me to drill down on what that is, because it is important that the whole project is pedestrian friendly enough where people can migrate from one building to the other without hopping in their car and driving 200 feet. Related to that is the islands. I can't tell exactly what the island construction is from the site plan, whether there are some that are level and some that are raised. If you could key those in, I can see that they're hatched in some cases and not hatched in others. I just think it's important to know what that construction is. I also note that there are no handicap spots in front of the new building. They're across the drive aisle to the new building, but let's face it, people in wheelchairs or elderly people using those handicap spots, they really need them to be as close to the retail store as possible, and forcing them to walk across the drive aisle isn't reasonable. So I would, if you're at your requirement and on what's shown, I'd say move 2 handicap spots, one in either end. You can use your walkway as your exit and not take up any more space, and that frees up some extra parking for non-handicap users in front of the Stop and Shop. The paving on the whole site, I saw some details or notes on the plans that said cut paving here, and I see some notes that say existing paving to remain. Now, Paul Colery made some comments about the paving and sinkholes and where work has been done, and it looks like it may not have been compacted properly. Whatever's areas are problematic, they should be dug up and recompacted. Or if there's a performance standard and testing that has been done in those areas, it is typical to sometimes have a testing agency work in tandem with the work that's done to make sure it's done right, up to Paul Colery's point. But the paving in this entire plaza isn't great. So if the plan is to just pave behind new pavement behind the building and a few areas around the building for islands, I don't think that does the overall project justice. I really think you need to do final paving on everything, because you got these glue strips, black glue lines, and it just looks like it's tired. It needs a new final coat of paving like they did at the Curtis Liquors Plaza about 3 years ago. And there are some other details that I mentioned about the site. Like I think there was a lawn area, play area that was going to be above the septic system. I don't see if that's changed. Certainly the grading's changed, so it's different. I'd like to see what that is and whether that's a realistic play frisbee throwing dad with his son, who's a resident there, with playing baseball, or something useful to those residents. So the final thing has to do with affordable housing. And I think, Jeff, you had said that the documents had been submitted to DHCD and it's been approved by DHCD pending getting certificates of occupancy for those residential units. Is that the case?
No, that's not what I said. I said
Okay, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
What is the status of the affordable housing? Because you also indicated that there were some veterans who were interested in that the approval of the housing. We did have, the town had a housing consultant, I think helping out a little bit, but you needed to have a lottery system and then get a certain documentation to DHC for their pre-approval to make sure that you had all their conditions covered before construction.
Right, so I can let Donald speak to that. I know that what occurred and what I had indicated earlier that is kind of new with respect to the affordable housing is that the town Board of Selectmen and my client both signed the deed restriction, which was required to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, which is commonly referred to, and maybe Lauren can help with this as the, because I think Lauren was involved in the process, as the regulatory agreement, which sets forth kind of the playbook for how folks are going to qualify and so forth. So
But
that
typically,
has been done.
an application goes to DHCD with a lottery system that's developed by you, the applicant, as a part of that. And I'm sure it's like a 400-page document that has to go to the DHCD for approval. Just a simple deed restriction, that's great. There's a number of other steps. So, I mean, in terms of doing a timeline, what would be the earliest and the latest of getting those affordable units on the SHI?
So that's a complicated question.
Okay. Fair enough. You don't have to answer
Lauren,
it right now.
Lauren might be able to weigh in on that.
You don't have to answer it right now. I know it's after 9 and no good decisions are made on boards after 9 o'clock, but I just want to put a bug in here that that's on the Mile High thing. That's I think important to follow up on and have a sense for it.
Yeah, I just want you to know is we have employed a consultant, and the town had a consultant as well who oversaw this process. So Donald or Lauren can jump in on that, but I was under the impression, based upon what I heard from the town's consultant, that once occupancy permits were issued, at that juncture, the units, and only that juncture, qualify for the SHI inventory. And there was a question with respect to the town of Cohasset as to the implications that we've been grappling with this. It's been difficult to get an answer on this. The implications of the recent census and how those numbers are finalized and how they affect this entire analysis. And so I see Lauren's hand is up.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of things. First, in terms of the regulatory agreement and the deed restriction material that Clerk Brewer had referenced, that material was reviewed by council, by town council at the time, which was Cindy Amara for Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, and Lehane, and that documentation was completed, signed off by the select board, and submitted to DHCD. It is correct that the sort of triggering item for this application to have these units eligible for the SHI will be the certificate of occupancy. And then I just want to, I just recently got an update because I've been tracking this very carefully in terms of when we anticipate census updates. And I most recently got an update actually earlier this week, straight from, hold on, let me just pull this up. This is from Phil DiMartino of the Department of Housing and Community Development. And the SHI, I'm just going to read the email for you for the record. The SHI is used to measure a community's stock of low or moderate income housing for the purpose of Mass General Law, Chapter 40B. Please note the SHI has not been updated to reflect 2020 census figures. The 2020 census restricting data, Public Law 94 171 summary file that has been released by the US Census Bureau does not include the data on vacant, seasonal, occasional, or recreational use units by DHCD to determine census year-round housing units for the SHI. The SHI will therefore continue to reflect the 2010 census year-round housing unit figures until such data is released. The Census Bureau has not yet published a release schedule for future data sets that will include this data, although it has indicated that releases may not occur until late in 2022. And then they give us a link for the census website and an opportunity to sign up for email. So that was an email I received this Monday, November 1st. So at this time, we're not anticipating census data for the SHI to be updated until late 2022. So we're still operating using the information that we had from the previous decennial census of 2010. So it's a long-winded answer to say that our sort of the percentage stock that we have anticipated changing, it's been delayed because of the census delays and all the information that is now ripple affected as delay from the census and the pandemic that ensued. And we are not anticipating a change in our percentage until at this time, late 2022, when those when that data sets are released, and they can then use those information to update the SHI counts.
So one could conclude that Cohasset is not under pressure at this moment to such an extent that we have a possibility of being out of alignment with 40B. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so thank you. Mr. Brewer, I still have comments that I would like to make before I turn to the public. So Mr. Brewer, are you completed with your comments?
Well, just on the affordable housing component, those would be parallel tracks. Whatever happens in terms of the census and the counts, that's separate from the applicant trying to expedite getting the units on the SHI and complying with whatever requirements DHCD has. Obviously, if they're expedited and they're on the SHI, when it comes time for the new census data, that's good. That helps us. So I think I've made all my points. I'll let you take it away, Amy.
Great, thank you very much. So some of the things that I'm going to ask questions about or make statements about are reiterations of things that have been discussed so far, just so that we have a full record and nothing that has slipped by. So I have concerns, or I have issues that I'd like to address that are related to stormwater, septic versus sewer, with the soil type behind the buildings, traffic simulation around the Stop and Shop building now that the changes have been made, the assessment of the soils to determine whether or not there's had been any migration over time, or if there's any circumstances that we would want to be notified of. I also would like to see data that explains the calculation of 20 bedrooms equals X volume of water versus a 10,000 gallon tank. And I want to see the data on what Stop and Shop uses on an annual basis, month by month, in terms of water, because of the differences during summer versus winter in terms of people shopping versus people who are here visiting Cohasset just for the summer. I would request that there be a generator and not to be on site to operate the water removal system during power outages. In the last 5 years, we've had at least 4 days a year where we've had power outages throughout town. And so leaving it to guess is not a good idea, and a generator would make sense. I would like to know how they, the next thing I'd like to say is, in terms of the stormwater system that's been designed for this project, is its quality and its effectiveness based on performance or based on design? Because it should be based on performance and not based on design. And I'd like to see some reference to that. I'd like to know what was in fact going on in the soil in the back of the building that required the change of the plan for the removal of wastewater? And why is it now being given a new use? And what is the relationship between the soil type and the new use that's going to be taking place there? I'd like to reiterate the fact that we want to see the coverage analysis. And I really am interested in a real simulation of the traffic circulation. And the reason is because it's a parking lot. It's not a street. So you can simulate whether those trucks can make it around the area with ease, that cars can move around with ease. Right now, it looks incredibly tight in terms of the entryway and the various conveyance lanes, which are going to be moving people around the site. So I think those are my comments, which are some new and some old. And so with that, we can take public comments. And let me say that there was a comment in the chat from the very beginning, and I believe that Jen Oram was going to read the comment into the record. So let's begin with that.
Madam Chair, I regret to inform you that Jen's departed. And
Okay.
I don't have the record of the comments that were taking place before I had left and came back for advisory. So unfortunately, I don't have those. There's a couple of comments in the chat right now. I will note again for the public, if you weren't here at the beginning of the meeting, we asked that you insert your name and address into the question and answer section so that we can take you accordingly.
So I wrote the resident's name down. It's Miss Reardon. And she wanted a statement read into the record. Perhaps she'd like to come online and actually say it herself.
Sure, she's still with us. So one moment, please.
Madam Chair, it looks like one of your panelists that's up has his hand up.
He does actually, but she had put a request in. He is actually a member of the public.
As am I. I'm an abutter at Cook Estate. I think what is important to know is that the tight tank to hold the water has already been installed, as has the system, the water retention system behind for the stormwater. They're already, I don't mean to sound foolish about my question, but I wondered why we're having a hearing when it's already happened. That's my primary issue. It's not that we object or that I object to the building or the changes in the back of the building and the parking places that are going to go there and the hill with grass as opposed to a brick retaining wall. But I just don't really understand why we're having a hearing when this stuff has already happened.
Lauren Lind, would you comment on that?
So it's difficult for me to comment on that. I will say that I know that there had been a stop work order placed on the site due to site activity that was occurring that was not permitted. This, I believe, was one of those factors.
Okay. I just wanted to go on record. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Reardon. I think it's clear from what Ms. Lynn said. So can we take the public comments in order? And I'm not sure when Mr. Stasko raised his hand or whether he put a comment in the chat.
He did not put a comment in the chat. He is the applicant.
Yeah, he's the owner of the property.
I know that. I just wanted to be fair to people that have been in line wishing to make a comment. Mr. Stasko, would you like to comment?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if he's not available, could I just put my hand up? Could I just ask for
Yeah,
clarification?
you may go ahead. Yes.
Lauren, did you say there was a stop work order put on this job?
Yes.
And when was that issued?
I don't have that detailed information, but I can get that to you tomorrow.
It's weeks ago.
Yes.
I think that, don't you think that would have been helpful for the rest of the board members here to know that? I mean,
Actually, we did have that. We were notified of that by John Hallen.
Okay, I feel like I'm in the dock a little bit, but going back to, I'm sorry, she's gone now, maybe Jane, I believe. Did you say that was a tight tank that was installed? I didn't inspect the tank, but I just noticed that there was a tank in the ground that wasn't there a few weeks ago, or whenever the last time was I was there. Did you say it was a tight tank?
She did indicate it was a tight tank.
And that's not an allowed use in a new construction setting. I mean, could one of the engineers speak to that? I'm getting smashed with all this information and I'm very confused.
Mr. Reardon, can you comment?
I can't offer much in the way of an opinion as to the allowance of a tight tank. I do know that there was a holding tank installed, same thing as a tight tank generally. And my understanding is that while it was installed in the ground, it was not installed in a usable condition and that it hasn't been used. That's my understanding from conversation with town staff. And that's unfortunately, I don't have a history on the site to be able to tell you one way or the other about the installation of that tank.
Mr. Reardon, when you say that you spoke to town staff, did you speak to the building inspector or were you talking with someone else?
So we had a meeting, couple of meetings. One before we received information on the site, which, you know, the information that we received on the 21st. We had a meeting prior to that. I think it was 3 days prior, and that was with Lauren Lind, Jen Oram, and John Howland.
All right, thank you. Mr. Stasko?
With reference Mr. Brewer's comments on the affordable housing, that's all been signed, sealed, and delivered with the state. The lottery has taken place. There's approximately 5 people that have applied for units in there. And I keep on getting requests, when do you think it'll be ready? And I can't answer that question until we get through this process. So that's all been adopted by the state, signed, seal, and deliver. And the lottery has gone out to the people to go into the low-income affordable units. With reference to the questions with reference to the pavement, last December, we put the binder coat down in front of the building. And the day after we put it down, we had 6 inches of snow. A binder coat is an impervious material that goes down first, and then the top coat is a pervious material. The building inspector has allowed us, per the permit we already have, to pave in front of the building, the rest of the binder coat, and put the top coat on the north end of the building and 20 feet in the back of the building. He has not given us permission to backfill or pave over the tanks that are installed. The one tank that installed, it's not what they consider a tight tank. When they say tight tank, it's a tank that will not take water in from the exterior. So it's a tank that will not allow infiltration water from around it. Tight tanks are not allowed in the state. DEP has been very clear about that. The 10,000 gallon tank that's been put in was a recommendation of DEP at the time. And it's a recommendation that they have now for excess storage. DEP should approve the plan totally by Friday of this week. We had correspondence today from DEP, and what they wanted on the plan was to limit it to 20 bedrooms usage until we are able to hook up to the sewer system. There are 12 one-bedroom units and 8 two-bedroom units. They're only allowing 20 bedrooms to be occupied. So if all 12 one-bedroom units are occupied, that leaves us 3 two-bedroom units to be occupied, which would equal 20. With reference to sinkholes or whatever, that has to do with the binder, which is a pervious surface versus having the permanent surface put on. Prior to putting the permanent surface on, all the areas that have broken up because we put it down at the wrong time of the year in a snowstorm will be excavated, recompacted, a binder put on, and then the top coat will be on. The whole parking lot will be resurfaced with a whole new surface when we finally get to that point in time. Hopefully I've answered the questions about the asphalt. I've answered the questions about the housing, what's been accepted. The lottery has taken place. There's 5 people that want to occupy the units. We have a disabled veteran, a homeless veteran. We have people within the community with disabilities that have applied and been accepted by the state.
Thank you, Mr. Stasko. That's very helpful for the clarification purposes. Let's continue with the public comments. We have 3 comments in the Q&A, and I'm sure, Lauren, you might have other people as well.
Sorry, I was muted. Alicia Babcock of 9 Eldred Lane has inserted a couple of comments. I'll read them. The parking in the rear of the building is against the property line. It would have to be illuminated. Has there been a photometric plan done to show that the brightness of the light ends at the property line and will not impact Cook Estate? Also concerned about noise from the traffic in the back. Will that be one-way traffic, and will there be trucks allowed to travel in the back? Thank you. Second comment, can you please explain what happened with the deed that makes all 20 apartments eligible for 40B? Has the town determined that this will be the outcome for those units? Third comment, does the slope of the hill in the back require a retaining wall regardless of the septic that will no longer be buried there?
Can I
All right. All right, thank you.
Would you like us to comment on that?
Yes.
Okay. I'll let Don, it sounded like Donald was going to answer the question, some of the questions, but the parking in the rear of the building, I do not believe is up against the property line. It's, I don't think it's too close. Andrew, you might be able to answer that. I do think that there is probably a grade change as well. So that should help with headlights. Donald, traffic circulation and truck access to the rear of the building.
Right. So if I can address those. By eliminating the septic system, we've eliminated an 8-foot retaining wall that used to hold the septic system. So the grade is much gradualer going down. We have loomed it this past week. We'll be hydroseeding it hopefully Friday. As far as from the property line, I believe the parking is about 100 feet from the property line. The grade goes gradually up, and on the top of it is a flat area. Reference Mr. Brewer's comments. It's a quite large flat area that could be used for recreational use. The grade going up is gradual where you can walk up to it. And on the property line below the Cook Estate, there's very heavy vegetation with trees that are between 75 and 100 feet tall. One of my arrangements with the Cook Estate was to put in a large $75,000 worth of screening. So the residents that are on the west end of the Cook Estate wouldn't see any of the buildings. I think I've addressed all those questions. And it's one way around the building. It'll go from south to north. And the parking, the angled parking is at the foot of the grade. So there's no way that any traffic lights would shine on any residents about 100 feet away, and about, I think they're about 60 feet above where the parking is. And there's a quite steep embankment from the Cook Estate to my property line.
All right, thank you. That's helpful for clarification purposes. May we continue with public comments, Lauren?
There's no further public comments in the question and answer.
All right, thank you. Mr. Colery, were you about to ask a question?
Well, actually, somebody was driving by my office beeping, so I just wanted to wave to them. But
Yeah.
yes, I do just have one follow-up question. Mr. Stasko, did you already complete the screening process there for the abutters?
Yeah, that was completed 2 years ago. And I think Miss Reardon, she's the chairman of the Cook Estate, can verify that. If she's still with us.
Yeah, just wanted the abutting neighbors that might be here to know if it's completed or not. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, it was completed 2 years ago. Tomasi Landscaping did them. One of the requirements, we brought in 25-foot trees. That's why it was so expensive.
Thank you. So let me ask again, Ms. Lind.
Sorry, I'll just note that Ms. Reardon did comment yes in the chat in response to Mr. Stasko, and then Alicia Babcock added, I would like to request that there be a formal photometric plan done and not assume that trees will block the light. The trees were for visual, for the homeowners that face the lot. And those are the only remaining questions. Thank you.
All right. Would any other of the planning board members like to ask further questions? All right, Clark, would you like to ask a further question?
No, I mean, motion to continue if we're at that point.
We are at that point. I just want to make sure that the combination of the recordings and when Miss Lind was gone, if anybody has notes that could be of value to her, that they would perhaps give them to her so that she has a full reference deck of the conversations that we've had. Can we get a date and time for the continuance?
Yes, we'll say December 1st at 6:30 p.m. with the exact time to be determined closer to the hearing date. It won't begin earlier than 6:30.
All right, thank you. Mr. DeLisi?
Thank you. Thank you very much for all your comments. We'll endeavor to provide the materials and answers that were requested. I am wondering if the board would entertain some kind of consensus to allow us to do the trench work that we requested, if possible.
I can poll the members and see what people feel. Is that appropriate, Lauren? Clark Brewer?
You know, I would defer to our consultant, Jim Worden. If he recommends that from at this point, with his preliminary review of documentation, then I'd be surprised, but I'd defer to his expertise and recommendation to the board.
So just a minute, let Miss, just a minute here. Miss Lind?
Sorry, thank you. I just want to just pause for a moment. We don't want to put Jim Reardon in an uncomfortable position. This really actually is a decision for John Hallen, our building inspector, and the enforcement officer who issues the permits to make a decision on.
All right, thank you. I would also say that Mr. Reardon has not completed the analysis that he is doing for us, so it would be difficult for him to make a determination at this time. So I'm going to do a poll and ask planning board members their preference as to whether or not we would be willing to meet the desires of the applicant, Mr. Colery, or excuse me, Mr. Grady,
No, not at this time.
Mr. Callahan. Sorry, sir, you're muted.
I'd rather not do that until I hear John's input.
All
I
right,
think
thank-
Sean, I
This
think
is straw
Sean
poll.
has
This is
made an
just a-
input.
I'm
This is
not
just
going
a
to take your
straw
word for
poll
that,
for.
Jeff.
This
from
is
the
a
planning
straw
board, right?
poll. That's
No, I think
correct.
it's in writing to the board. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be argumentative. I thought that when we just saw Mr. Reardon's comments, that he commented on the trench work and that he didn't seem to have an issue with it. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the board. That's all.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And I would like to continue, Ms. Lind.
Sorry, don't mean to disagree or counter or make things difficult. I can't confirm that John Hallen has agreed to proceed this way. And I know that last I spoke with him, which was earlier today, that he had indicated that he wanted the board to complete their review prior to making a decision on that. So I don't have a confirmation that John Hallen is ready to proceed that way.
That's
I
very good.
didn't mention Mr. Hallen. I mentioned Mr. Reardon.
Yes, and we appreciate that. But it is actually Mr. Hallen who has jurisdiction here. So essentially, based on what Ms. Lind said, it would seem to me that it's not necessary to take a straw poll, that we would continue this, and that following with Ms. Lind's comments about Mr. Hallen's responsibility to weigh in on this, that we would continue and not grant the request. Mr. Brewer?
Yeah, motion to continue the hearing to 1st of December at 6:30.
Second,
Roll call. Mr. Potter, not here. Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Mr. Callahan,
aye.
Mr. Colery,
Aye.
Mr. Brewer.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. We still have a little bit of business to do this evening before we close. Thank you, Mr. Reardon. Thank you, Mr. Chagnon. Thank you, Mr. Pretty. Thank you, Mr. Stasko. We still have a little bit of business to do this evening, and I'm going to turn it over initially to Ms. Lynn because she's got some information for us, and then I think we may want to open up a conversation amongst ourselves.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be brief. I want to just update you on items on the horizon in addition to our upcoming planning board meeting schedule, which is November 17th, December 1st, and December 15th, respectively. We also have been requested by request of the town manager, Chris Senior, as well as the select board, to engage in a joint meeting between the select board, the planning board, zoning board, and master plan implementation committee, including the zoning bylaw working group, to have a sort of roundtable dialogue discussion about embarking on a comprehensive zoning redraft, which we have discussed in past iterations. There's been a request for funding so we can proceed. And now it's the request and wish of the select board to convene a meeting on November 9th. It is to be scheduled in person at Wolcott Commons. And it will be a joint meeting to have a presentation to go over master plan and zoning bylaw working group goals, and then hear everyone's public input about goals and themes that we would like to see out of a zoning rewrite. And then from there, we would take that information and boil it down into advising a request for proposals to go out so that we could select a consultant to proceed with this endeavor. So with that said, I would like to ask all of you to mark your calendars for next week, November 9th at Wolcott Commons. And the schedule is set for 8 o'clock at night.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'd also like to report that there was a 6-1 vote on changes to definitions and a 7-0 on ledge protection from the advisory committee this evening. So I'd like to open up a conversation based on a letter that was distributed to the select board and the advisory committee regarding the changes that we are talking about introducing in terms of the zoning process in Cohasset. And the letter suggested that we did not pursue correctly the investigation necessary to make the recommendations that we made. And I would like to just add some commentary about it so that it provides context for the letter that was received by all of us. And the first thing to say is that the master plan committee was chaired by Clark Brewer. And so he was supervising the processes under which we were operating. We also undertook a very as thorough as we could in our little town, visioning processes that generated summaries that the public provided that indicated what they were interested in seeing in the way of conditions unfolding in the community. And in those conversations, people were concerned about the, I hate to use the word lawlessness, but let's just say lax regulation in land use practices in town. So that is documented in the master plan and is in the record from the public from the processes that we are involved in. And I raise this because we cannot, if we are going to undertake a zoning bylaw transformation that is 35 years out of date and for which the building inspector has indicated he cannot do his job effectively if we do not change the situation as it stands. We have to operate as a board together. We cannot operate as individuals. It is our responsibility to hold up what the public asked us to do and gave us the information about their opinions. And if we're going to have debates about whether or not we personally feel one way or another, and we use the word I, from here on out, I'm going to make it really clear that we don't do that because we don't represent ourselves here. We represent the community. And so I hope that next week's meeting can be done as a united planning board and not a board that has divisions and concerns about what the public asked us to do and what John Hallen asked us to do, because he cannot do his job if we do not create the context for him to actually execute appropriately.
Hey, Amy, I haven't heard anything from John Halen. I don't know what his comments or needs are.
Well,
I haven't seen anything in writing, but I think as a long-standing planning board member, I felt an obligation to the public to explain my opposition to the particular definitions article because it's far-reaching, and I think I was clear. I think I have an obligation to the public to explain what I think of what happened, and as well as you do in explaining your positions on things. Each of us individually, as full members of this board, have an obligation to say really what we think. I don't know if you can ask us to stand in unison on anything in particular as board members. I mean, in terms of a comprehensive rewrite of the zoning bylaws, I certainly think that's long overdue, as you point out.
Thank you. Well, what I can, I'm just reporting
I'll tell you
what,
I'll tell you what.
go ahead, Tom.
I wasn't clear what I was going to say tonight, but I'll say this.
Come
Clark.
closer to your mic, please.
Clark, I was extremely angry and beside myself when I saw that letter yesterday. And I'm very
You have no right to be angry at me.
You know what? Just let me finish. And I'm very disappointed. And I'll tell you a story from close to 30 years ago when I was on Concom. We had
Is
a member
this
who
a
was
bitch
so
session at Clark Brewer, planning board member?
No, this is actually a preparatory
go ahead, yep.
conversation for next week.
Clark, why don't you stop interrupting and let the person speak for a change?
I'm muted.
A long time ago on Concom, we had a member who was so ticked off at one of our decisions, he tried to appeal it to DEP. And we were upset. We couldn't do much about it, but we eventually compelled his resignation. And the reason for that, and I'm not saying your letter rises to the level of going to a state agency, but you don't undermine your own board if you're on the losing side of a vote. We're all going to be on a losing side of a vote at some point in time. I think your letter crossed a line in undermining our board, and you certainly insulted the zoning working group. And I'm personally insulted. I'm insulted for every member to suggest that we didn't do our job and didn't do the research. I have been involved in this town on and off since 1989 and involved in a prior master plan effort with you, by the way, in 2000, to 2004. And I have to tell you, the work that the zoning working group is doing is the most thorough research that I've ever seen done in this town. We've had 30 years, you know, somebody got up at the 2017 town meeting when we were doing our citizens articles and said, why is the citizens group doing this? Why not the boards? Because they've never done it. There hasn't been a substantive zoning change proposed by a board in the land use boards in this town in 30 years. And the zoning working group is doing incredible work. And I was insulted about you implying to other boards in this town and undermining them that they hadn't done their job and hadn't been doing any research. And I think you crossed the line. You're entitled to your opinion. Minority positions on boards stand up at town meeting all the time. You knock yourself out. But you crossed the line with that one.
You guys can gang up on me. Honestly, during our hearings, public hearings, I felt ganged up on. And I'm feeling ganged up on now, and I don't like it, but I'm willing to listen.
You know what? You put out material like that, you're going to have to take some criticism. I'm sorry. There's been, well, whatever. I think we need, you know, there comes a point where the board makes a decision by a majority vote. The board has to defend that decision and stand by that decision. That's my point here. And we don't undermine you don't undermine your own board, and you don't undermine other boards in the town who are busting their chops to do work for the town and to try to improve the town and respond, as Amy said, to what the citizens want, which, by the way,
if you want to submit comments to me in writing, I'm happy to hear that. I do not want to be chewed out as a part of this meeting. I'd like to hear what the other members of this board have to say.
That's fine. We can certainly do that. I will ask Mr. Grady what his opinion is. What is he thinking? I'm not asking his opinion. I'm going to just ask what is he thinking.
What I'm thinking? Clark, I think you have a lot of intelligence. You know a lot of things, and you have the propensity to be an asset to the board. But I found that since you haven't been chair, you know, to be blunt, you got a hair across your ass over the whole thing. You're upset that you're not the chairman anymore. It shows, and it's apparent. And I find you disrespectful. I
disagree.
Towards the chair. Well, that's okay. I'm stating my opinion. But I find you disrespectful to the chair, disrespectful to the co-chair. And I just want to give you a heads up. You don't know it all. You're part of a group.
Never said I did know it all, my friend.
No, but then no, I'll take exception to that as well. But I'm giving you my opinion, Clark. All right. That's how you come across. You interrupt. You jump out in conversations. All right. Now, did you allow that when you were a board member? No. All right. You might want to coach someone who's the chair or even the co-chair, be a team member. Okay. That's my thought. It's apparent in every meeting that we have.
Thank you for that, Mr. Grady. Mr. Colery. And you don't have to comment if you don't wish to. It's just, I mean, we as a board have to have a conversation before next week, so we have a feeling for how we are going to work together.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is all new to me. I'll start out by saying that. So I'm 2.5 years as a volunteer member on this board, and I've gotten involved in some other boards around town, trying to help make a difference wherever I can. I don't know how the process works, but I can tell you that I feel right now, you want to know how people feel. I feel bad for Clark because I do feel like you guys are kind of ganging up on him. Now, I don't know what the process is, right? I've never been involved. I've never been an elected official. I've never been on any planning boards before. What I do know, mostly through my wife's influence, is about Ruth Bader Ginsburg in her dissent letters. Honest to God, this is all my experience that I have most recently to draw upon. I don't understand, like, to me, when I saw Clark's letter, I said, oh, that makes sense, because he's like, he was articulating in writing his dissent. And I thought that's what, honestly, because I've never been in this position before, you know, this is big things that we're talking about here, right? like no one's ever written a letter before, because the items that were either agreed upon, voted upon, discussed, didn't have the implications that these types of changes would have. So me being new to this community, I'm only 5 years in Cohasset. I don't know about the 30-year work history that Tom has volunteering, which, by the way, I want to personally thank all of you guys for doing what you do, because there's not enough people who get involved with civic engagement, you know, like we have and like we try to do. And like I said, I feel bad because Clark is one of us, equally elected like the rest of us, and has feelings towards changes. And again, being new to town and being new to a process like this, I've only heard through other people that Clark also articulated in his letter that normally these larger things would go into what is called annual town meeting versus this is, what is it called? This particular town meeting? Huh?
Special.
Special town meeting. So I don't know. I just thought of it as his dissent letter, and I thought it was well constructed, and I didn't realize that he couldn't use the pronoun I, you know, just because he was talking about his experience. I don't know. I actually reached out to Clark and I said, I thought your letter was well constructed and put together, and like, so I don't know if that gives you a gauge of where I'm at, but I feel bad for the person who is the point of a lot of people's direct comments, you know? And, you know, I don't know, maybe my whole life I've wanted to protect that person in the space. And so, you know, I don't know if there was a different way that this could have been done, but that's my 2 cents. And I'm
wish
not a
there was.
voting board member, so. I'm sorry, Tom?
I wish there was a different way. I don't like airing our dirty laundry either, but some things, you know, and again, it's a very fine line between dissenting and being able to express your dissent, but then undermining your own board and in criticizing and insulting another board for not doing work that you have no idea how much work they've done.
Yeah, I don't know what the dismiss of other board that you're referring to, but in terms of the dissent, I just thought, you know, he was articulating
He
how
was insulting the zoning working group that you and I are on, and you know, you and I are on this board and that board, and we report what's going on, and I'm just beside myself. That's all, and I'm sorry we have to vent it here.
So thank you, Paul. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Clark. I guess my only comment is really to reiterate 2 things. One is that we did a master plan process. We had public commentary. The public told us what they wanted us to do. There was a substantial consensus on the master plan committee itself, and we empowered something called the Master Plan Implementation Committee to carry out the will of the community. And in the letter, we were essentially accused of not doing the necessary investigations to follow through on what we had done in the master plan, and for which the Master Plan Implementation Committee has been doing the research. The really sad part about this is that it's not really a big deal that we're trying to do. We're not going to change a law. We're creating circumstances by which we can evolve that we can't. If we don't have them in place, then we don't have any implementation vehicle. But that doesn't mean we're going to change the zoning ordinance as it stands. It's just creating the context for something potentially to happen. Lauren, as the person who is sort of as deep in this as anyone is, how can we understand what we're trying to do in a way which doesn't seem threatening because that was never the intent.
So first, I want to say that I live in Switzerland on all these issues, but thank you all for voicing your concerns. I think what I'm hearing from both sides is a lot of passion and a lot of interest. And I think what I would suggest as sort of next steps in how we can improve communication amongst the board is that we pay more attention to dedicating time for these liaison updates. I know typically we kind of try to cram them in at the end of a very busy agenda, and it's like, you know, people want to go to bed, it's like rushed over. I know there was a couple of times that I think Tom tried to update the group about what zoning bylaw working group was doing. And it was like always at the end of a 3-hour meeting, people really didn't have the time. They wanted, you know, it was just like rushed. And I think that maybe moving forward, allotting time to dedicate those conversations, because then we also heard in the public hearings, and I know Eric's not here right now, but I remember Eric saying, you know, that he didn't feel like he knew what was going on. And it's like, I think that as a group, we need to work on solutions so that we all feel like we're in tune and that we're giving time to focus on things that aren't just applications before us, because that's how we improve communication between everyone and make sure everyone's feeling heard more often than when it comes to a public meeting.
Tom Callahan?
All right, as part of the liaison update, I mean, the next step after these changes for this town meeting, and that Tuesday is a big step towards, is the rewrite. And it's going to be a big thing, and it's a tough thing to rewrite 50, 60 pages of bylaw. You know, and at the same time, a whole new set of regulations, since things are going to be proposed to be moved. And like the Elm Street study group, there's been what now, 2 public forums, 3? Like the master plan, there were a number of public forums. Again, with the unfortunate restrictions of the Zoom process, the next step is going to require public forums, and there will be many. And part of the funding request is for somebody who can just facilitate doing that and doing it in an efficient manner. There will not be anything that's in the dark, but yet I thank you, Lauren, for bringing it up. I am frustrated that the attention span, once we get past 9 o'clock, 8:30, for Christ's sake, nobody wants to listen to the things I'm trying to convey, what the zoning working group is working on, so that you're not blindsided. And I'd appreciate it if people would pay attention to it, because everything has been talked about before this. And the regulation that you're going to see in 2 weeks, you've seen the prior versions of it. Tomorrow, it's going to go through its final vetting with the zoning working group and with Carolyn. And I will push that if it's okay, it'll get distributed to you on Friday so that you have 2 weeks to see it. But, you know, I mean, that's what we can do. I don't know what we do here within our board, but we need to, when we come to a decision, like it or not, the minority has to go along with it. I mean,
I don't agree.
Well, you know what?
I'm elected separately. We're all elected separately. And I just didn't like being ganged up on by your committee, the Master Plan Implementation Committee. And I've told you, Tom, I don't agree with your non-consensus building approach to these things. Now, I'm entitled to my opinion, and I thought I rendered it as fairly as I could. You can disagree, just as I disagree with your conclusions. And that's what makes a planning board strong, is when people are clear and have ideas and can articulate them based on research and information.
Yeah, and your letter implied that we didn't, which showed you didn't have the information. And we have been, our meetings are, we've been.
I'm entitled to my opinion, Tom, just like you are. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I understand that.
I'm not entitled to my opinion and
no,
you
you
express it.
I'm not
publicly.
I said that before, that you're entitled to your opinion, Clark. You're not entitled to denigrate other boards, including our own, and undermine our position. You made your points.
I don't think I did that.
You made your points. You had your vote. Someday I'm going to be on the losing end of a 4-to-1 vote too.
Look, you guys, you can gang up on me. That's fine. But
Whatever,
I'm going to
Clark.
sign off now.
So,
Okay?
wait.
Thank you and good night.
I want to see if we can find a mechanism by which we can resolve the problem of never having time to talk. And here's what I would say. every third meeting should be set aside for just planning board conversations and plans and actions, and have one out of 3 where we have the ability to work together and to find where the rubs are and to find places where there's consensus. If we don't actually schedule one space in time, and it has to be regularized, just like the land use boards are, we will not be able to come together. We're just simply not going to be able to do it. And if we're going to do a zoning bylaw rewrite, that's exactly what we're going to need to do. So I don't know. I mean, I know I hate to ask people to, think that it's always going to be 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, but that's the only way we're going to do it, is to pull one day out, one night out of 3 to actually do business until we can feel like we can be more trustful of each other again. Lauren?
So, it's actually that time of year where I'll be crafting our 2022 calendar. So I'm happy to incorporate that, and we can set aside time, whether it's the 3rd, it's a standing meeting, that at the top of the meeting, instead of at the end, we take 30 minutes and dedicate it to whatever the topic needs to be.
I don't think 30 minutes is actually going to be enough. I think if we say we're going to have a 2.5-hour meeting, we need to have at least an hour's worth of time to comment and reflect and to cassette. Otherwise, 30 minutes is just, okay, everybody's going to report, and we don't have any ability to do dialogue. So I think it is a minimum of an hour. So Carolyn, you've worked in many different settings. You've probably been in situations just like we are in now. So what's your recommendation for us to create a situation in which we can work together effectively, and we can dissent, but we can still cooperate?
I think what you're proposing, to set aside a little more time for discussion, I think that's going to be important, because I agree with what Tom has said and what Lauren has said. When you are dealing with zoning bylaw changes, we aren't just talking about inserting a comma here, or let's just rearrange the order. Things have a domino effect, and you really need to get people's attention, because it's more than just looking at, say, the 2 pages that might be before you on a given night. It's how does this impact everything else? I'm not saying that would necessarily change how Mr. Brewer feels about the proposed changes that the board has voted, but I do think that more time for discussion would certainly help to deal with some of these criticisms, perhaps at least maybe gain a greater appreciation of the work that has gone into it, that this wasn't just something that a person drafted and presented. Appreciating the research that went into it, or the studies and surveys that went into it. I think, if you give it a little more attention, I think that's going to come across. I think the more you also talk about it, the more you also hear some other concerns. And maybe that in the end, I think what you wind up with overall is a better working product. I don't know that there's any solution to get you to a unanimous vote, and I don't know that that's even realistic to hope for. But I do think that at least if the process is given a little bit more attention, that I think some of the criticisms that were raised in that letter, I think some of them would perhaps not exist, or would not would be minimized in some ways.
I would disagree with that in a heartbeat.
Well, we don't need to get into everything.
Right. So let me say something, which is sometimes us as a group can't facilitate ourselves, and it's needed to have somebody facilitate for you. And so in this 1 hour conversation of working, I would recommend that we actually ask our council to serve as the vehicle for, no, I hate to do this to you, but until we can recover. There's a recovery process that is necessary when somebody gets so upset that they turn themselves off. And when somebody like me says what I said, right? There's an emotional recovery process that has to take place. And we can't do it because we're not in alignment and we don't necessarily have the same empathy or sympathies. So somebody has to guide you sometimes so that you can make that happen. And work is a good way of doing it, but the work has to be facilitated. It can't be us and me or any one of us serving as the chair saying this or that. It actually takes a third party. So if the person who we're going to employ is going to help us evolve, but will serve as a guidance, not just somebody who comes in and says, okay, I made this change, here it is, this is what it is. We need a facilitator as well as somebody that's capable of constructing a revolution in the zoning bylaw. That's my view.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but Amy, you're asking Carolyn to carry a big box of Kleenex so she can hand out tissues to everyone who gets upset when they don't get their way?
No, I'm not. I'm actually, she's got all these years of experience dealing with exactly the kind of problem we're dealing with, and also rewriting zoning bylaws, and none of us have that experience. And so I'm asking for her professional competency.
Don't say none of us.
Well, it's true, Tom. You have the most experience. The Clark has the next most experience, and then everybody else is with what? But I do think that a recovery process is necessary at this moment because we have to work together. And if we don't find a way to retreat, to come back to a feeling of professional respect, we're going to be tied in knots. And we're going to fight. Tom?
I just want everybody to be clear about, the process going forward about the zoning rewrite. I mean, let's not forget, this committee with our work schedule, we do not have the time to do this ourselves. We all have made the decision long ago and have approved it of delegating this to first the master plan implementation committee and now to the zoning working group. They are essentially our subcommittee. And so not everybody on this board is going to be involved in all the gritty detail of writing this unless they want to attend the zoning working group. You've got two representatives, Paul and I, already there, but everybody else is welcome to come. They are in the middle of the day. I hate them in the middle of the day. They interrupt my work, but so be it. But I can't commit that committee by myself, nor Paul, but I will. I'm sure Katie's Dugan's watching this. I'll pledge to you that in addition to the public forums, I make sure that you know about every stage that's going on, that you'll be invited to things. When we as the zoning working group feel comfortable that we can distribute a piece of the rewrite, we will do that. I will try to see that that happens. I can't commit the zoning working group sitting here right now tonight to be releasing things, while they're in progress. There's reasons you don't release things while they're in progress, by the way. But, we have this subcommittee. They're going to be doing all the heavy lifting. And obviously it's the planning board that then has to make a recommendation on this under section 48, section 5 at the end of the day. So I will do what I can to do that. But there are going to be parts of the rewrite that are going, where there's substantive changes that are going to need more than a half hour, more than an hour sometimes. Some nights they'll say, hey, hey, the parking regs, the sign regs, we're not changing those bylaws at all. Okay, there's my report, 2 minutes. But there's going to be other things when we get to the tables, the uses and the areas and definitions. There's going to be some substantive changes that are proposed, and it's going to take some time. I'll pledge to try to do that and make sure the zoning working group realizes that we need to involve this board sooner rather than later and in a great level of detail. I'll do my best to do that. I've been chomping at the bit to get this rewrite out there, and we're going to start discussing it tomorrow and next Tuesday.
Okay, so, Paul,
Yeah, Tom, very good, but I don't think you have to placate or defend yourself against one angry pup, all right, who just got
No,
off.
all five of it, look, all
I
five of us
seriously,
have a job.
Yeah, every one of us, and we all work hard. We all do what we do. We have different things. It's a volunteer board. And again, if someone wants to get off the board and take the ball and go home, let them take the ball and go home. That's the way I was brought up, all right? Or throw the ball at them and get them in the head. But, you know, you don't have to defend your own. Both you and Paul volunteer for a number of boards, much appreciated. I wish I had the time to do it. I just don't. And I'm not in town enough. But I don't think you need to defend yourself. I mean, we can get angry over like different things, like stripping things that I wanted on the thing. But what am I going to do about it on the zoning right? If that comes back later, good.
I'm not
But
trying to
I'm
defend
gonna
myself.
undermine the board when we have something to say. Then you discuss it. All right.
I hate to do this, but Paul has been waiting patiently.
All right,
Paul
I'm
O'Leary,
sorry, Paul.
And
Oh, I
I'd
didn't
like to,
understand.
and no, and that's not to cut you off, Paul Grady, if you still
Not at
are,
all.
Paul
No.
Cleary.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt him.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in just one thing, well, a couple of things. So the one thing about the stop work order, that really caught me off guard tonight. I just couldn't believe that that wasn't at least brought up. I mean, I feel like I do a pretty good job checking all my emails. I didn't see anything about John Hallen issuing a stop work order. And I thought there was a bunch of discussion that happened tonight that could have been much shorter in discussion and like, I don't know.
So you know what's unfortunate, Paul? Stasko is a bad person. And he does things that people have known for decades are done behind the scenes, and he just tries to get away with it. And he's a very powerful and very wealthy person, so he can buy most of his way through.
Amy,
Madam Chair,
yeah,
could we?
Amy, I'd let that one slide.
Wait this since
Okay,
we.
but
it's in
the reason that we don't have more information about things like that is that the flow is incredibly speedy. You know, John Hallen has to be at every job site once a week. So the ability to monitor what somebody's supposed to do is not possible with one person.
And I'm not, all I'm saying is if there's a project coming before us and there's a future stop work order, it would be helpful for me as a person who, sees building permits and is involved and associated with some developments in different communities. You know, if there's a stop work order, there's a stop work order. There's like some serious things going on. So I'd just say in the future, if there's a stop work order, whoever the person may be, to bring it to our attention, I think it would be helpful for the board. That's all I'm going to say about that. Next is, and this isn't, none of this was really about John Hallen, but it just may turn out to be a little bit about John. I've never heard John say that he was having a difficult time. I understand that there needs to be lots of changes to our zoning stuff, right? But I never, Madam Chair, I think you said that John Hallen can't do his job because of the current zoning that we have on the books. I've actually never heard him say that. Just wanted to be clear on that as well. I do, however, understand that our zoning bylaws are 35 years old and need a ton of overhauling and changes need to be made. So I'm on the zoning bylaw working group because I understand that change needs to happen. I just wanted to set the record straight as far as all that goes.
Lauren Lind.
So I just want to remind the board, please refrain from talking about open public hearings and specifics because it's really just not good practice.
Sorry about that.
I also just, in terms of what I would suggest in terms of next steps is a little bit of homework for all of you to do some brainstorming and give me the feedback that you think that we could do to improve our processes. I'd like to hear it all in terms of, like, Paul, what you think would be more helpful, like more communication with stop work orders, things like that. I think you all have great ideas. I think at this point, we might be getting a little bit down a rabbit hole, and I just want to keep us all, on the straight and narrow. I'm not trying to curtail conversation. I think we all have productive thoughts and things, but I think at this hour, maybe we try to filter it and give me your thoughts. We'll continue this conversation another night.
So two things. One is we will schedule we'll start with once every 3 weeks. We'll leave the first hour when we're freshest to be able to discuss whatever is on the table. And then we'll see how that works in terms of being able to regularize information sharing and also airing issues that are of concerns to people. The second thing is that there should be occasions when John Helen actually comes and talks to us, right? Because he's so busy that he doesn't have time to, take one question at a time. So maybe we should schedule something with him on a quarterly basis to sort of give us a 30,000 foot level view of what's taking place.
I will have that discussion with him.
Okay, and if you could, Lauren, to have it, I don't think I'm articulating the concern that John has regarding how to implement our rules correctly. So it would be useful to have that stated in a formal way so we understand why he would care about it, right? Why it's not something that he is opposing. Okay, well, listen, thanks a lot, everybody. This was a rough night in many ways, but in other ways, it just has to happen. And we'll go forward and we'll meet up again next week. Is it right? Next week?
Is it next week?
It is next week.
It is next week.
Lauren,
Yeah.
can I ask you a question?
You sure can.
I really like you, but we're seeing an awful lot of each other. What's the story with all this?
I know we have been, it's been a very busy, we had to add an extra meeting in October because of the public hearing season for the warrant. And then this meeting on the 9th has been requested and set by the select board. So I'm just answering the request to convene all of these groups.
You do know what that means, don't you?
That meeting on the 9th is in person?
It is, yes.
Yeah, it should be. It should be.
Okay, so we will convey this to Clark so that he's aware of what's going on. And Lauren, you're likely to be the person that speaks to him because he comes into town pretty frequently, is to give him a digest of what happened. And nobody wants to dislike anyone. That's not the point. The point is we want to find a way to work together, and we just have to take the time to do that.
I'm also going to ask Eric, who wasn't here for this part of the conversation, same homework I assigned to all of you, process improvements, thoughts, please send them to me so that I can sort of condense them and we can determine a collective way that makes sense for everybody to progress and move forward.
Okay, Paul Caleri, last word.
I feel like Lawrence O'Donnell. I get the last word. Let's see. Tom, tomorrow at what time? 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock? Remind me, please.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. See you then. And that wasn't my last word. Sorry. Did you say next week is in person? That's also new for me.
Yes.
So we will also have a Zoom option because I already know I'm out of town, but I'm planning on attending. Will this be up and running?
It will be a hybrid meeting.
Perfect.
Yes, let me get some logistics about participation via hybrid options. Again, this is like a new field again after a year and a half of all virtual. So more details to come. I'll be in touch.
Lauren,
Make sure you have a really good connection, a really strong Wi-Fi, because the dual system doesn't work very well unless you have a lot of power behind you.
Is this the select board meeting? The one
Yes.
that's gonna be dual?
It is the select board meeting. They're opening their agenda at 6:30. They have a town hall building discussions taking place at 7, and then the joint zoning conversation is scheduled to start at 8 p.m.
All right, so that's dual. You might be able to do it by Zoom? Or is it all in person?
It's in
Not
person.
entirely certain. It's going to be in person. It will be hybrid. I don't know how well we're going to be able to participate because it's my understanding that this is also like the first trial of doing the hybrid. So again, I will confirm all this tomorrow. I haven't set up the meeting logistics. It's through the select board's office, but I will get information for all of you.
Okay. Well, I think we can sign off, can't we? Do we have
Yes.
to make?
Oh, wait a minute. We haven't voted to adjourn.
But I'm so emotionally charged. I don't know if I can do that.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Okay, Paul Caleri,
Aye.
Tom Callahan,
Aye.
Paul Grady,
Already aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye. Adios, amiga, amigos.
All right, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you,
Caroline.
Carolyn.